Chapter 329. Even after leaving the floating island for a long time, Aya was still immersed in shock. How could that be possible? Aya seriously recalled the eloquence of Wang Lu. After thinking about it, she could only admire him. Actually, there are still a lot of loopholes in your story. Hearing Aya's sigh, Wang Lu said with a smile. After all, the story is essentially a lie. According to strict logical reasoning, it is certainly not tenable. However, logic is not omnipotent. The story has been so sensational. What else can he do? After a pause, Wang Lu said, fortunately, the stone gate is a human, so it has the wisdom and feelings of human beings. It can be impulsive and misjudge. Otherwise, this level would be a bit difficult. But if it's not a human, how could it make such an unreasonable request? In fact, my story is essentially based on it. A fool who has been exiled and punished for more than 10,000 years, but is still loyal to the Golden King and brooding over his past mistakes. Along the stairs, the group walked in a dark independent space. Only the stairs under their feet shone. Before long, the scenery in front of them changed, and another stone gate appeared in front of them. Only, this time, it was not an open area. Behind the stone gate, there was obviously a long and narrow corridor. Deeper in the corridor, there was an endless unknown. Is the next level the second level? Wang Lu was eager to try. My adventurer's spirit is already unbearably hungry. Unfortunately, the second level did not have a shortcut like the first level. Because the stone gate was just a stone gate, it did not have its own wisdom. Perhaps its design was relatively rigid, or perhaps after more than 10,000 years, the original intelligent life has gone extinct. In short, there were vague handwriting on the stone gate, which explained the rules of the second level in ancient language. But perhaps because of the long time, many of them were already blurred and difficult to understand. After the efforts of Wang Lu and Aya, the final result was, the endless labyrinth contains endless unknowns. Every weakness of human nature will be captured. The tough test needs to be faced with blades and swords. Only when the 5 of us are united can we enter and reach the other side. Wang Lu repeated the rules a few times and tried to summarize them. Simply put, it's a huge labyrinth that requires a team of 5 to open. There are all kinds of traps, some to test one's character, and some to test one's combat power. It's a comprehensive labyrinth dungeon. Aya said, if the difficulty of this championship trial is progressively higher, then the difficulty of this level is likely to be higher than the previous one. Moreover, as far as I know, in the era of the Golden King, most of those who could obtain the title of champion were strong people who were close to the legendary realm. With our current lineup, I'm afraid. What is there to be afraid of? With a former legend like you around, can't we just crush them all the way? Aya was a little shaken. I'm sorry, but I'm in a very bad situation right now. Wang Lu asked in surprise and concern. What's wrong? Does someone with a heroic spirit physique have a menstrual period? Doesn't that mean I'll get pregnant? Aya, I know what you're worried about. It doesn't matter. Since I promise to be your invincible faith, when you're in a bad situation, I'll cut through the thorns and thorns. Wang Lu said and then came to the door in high spirits. Well, if there's any test, bring it on. I'll let you see the real skill of clearing the dungeon. Behind him, Aya somewhat helplessly shook her head and smiled, but her heart was gradually filled with warmth. Yes, although he always does things unexpectedly, but perhaps I can really believe in him. I believe that he can help me rebuild my country and restore the glory of Bretonia. If it's him, he can certainly do it. With that thought in mind, Aya felt that her heroic spirit physique had further solidified. The haze that was caused by Wang Lu's presumptuous decision was also dispelled. Well, although from a rational point of view, Wang Lu hasn't really convinced me, but, for the time being, I'll trust him for the time being. However, Aya's impassioned words, which gradually warmed her heart, were met with silence from the stone door. The gray door was tightly closed, shutting out the group of challengers. Moreover, there was no sign of it opening. Wang Lu gawked for a moment, unable to figure out why the door didn't open. He walked forward and knocked on the door. Open the door, we're good people. No response. Open sesame? No response. Little rabbit, be good and open your legs? There was still no response, except for Aya angrily punching Wang Lu. That's strange. Wang Lu pondered. Did we do something wrong? Or is there something wrong with the way we enter the door? It's not like we have to resort to violence as soon as we open the door, right? Aya said, it's best not to try to break this door by force. I don't think that's a good idea. Luli also added, I also think it's better not to break the door. Since the two people with the sharpest intuition said so, Wang Lu gave up the idea and turned his eyes back to the writing on the stone door. Only when 5 people are united can we enter and reach the other side. Could it be this sentence? Wang Lu said, only when a team of 5 people can we continue to move forward. Is there a problem with this sentence? But, even if we must gather 5 people to move forward, we have already gathered them. Luli curiously said, have you gathered them? Senior brother, 1 for you, 1 for Aya, 1 for Little Bai, and 1 for Hua Hua, there are obviously 4 of them. Wang Lu looked at her as if he was looking at an unlucky naughty child. Or Luli, your IQ is no longer recognized in the human category. Having said that, Wang Lu certainly didn't think that Luli was really out of the human category. There were many times when this little girl was stupid and adorable, but at most, her brain lacked a few tendons. Correspondingly, her other tendons were exceptionally developed. Her memory and calculation ability were so strong that even he, the top student of Spirit Sword Sect, was dumbfounded. If it wasn't Luli, then who was it? Wang Lu's first reaction was naturally Quan Zhouhua. This model dog was the most different from the human standard. However, strictly speaking, there was no reason to exclude it from the team. First, as the highest-level mythological beast, Hua Hua would transform into a human sooner or later. Although in the Western continent mythology, there was no precedent of Fenrir transforming into a human, on Spirit Sword Mountain, the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall believed that it was only a matter of time. Second, Western continent and 9 regions were different. The distinction between Chinese and barbarian was not so strict, and the boundary between human and beast was also relatively vague. It must be known that most of the professions in Western continent had the bloodline of strange beasts. For example, Aya was the inheritor of the dragon bloodline. And in the era of Golden King, this kind of hybridity was brought to the extreme. Some of the generals under the command of Golden King were magical beasts, and none of them had ever transformed into a human. So, what reason did this stone door have to shut Fenrir outside? After thinking about it, this stone door was still closed, which was really hard to figure out. And at this time, Luli suddenly said, the stairs to come here are gone. Wang Lu looked back and sure enough, the shining stairs had faded and disappeared. The team was isolated in front of the stone door, in a small square. What should I do? I'm hungry. Luli very decisively put forward the most realistic question. It was not that she was gluttonous, but in the past 3 days, when she concentrated on making wine cups in the inn, she actually didn't eat anything. With her current physique, she indeed didn't need to eat. However, eating has become a habit, and it was more of a psychological dependence. Just like a smoker who hasn't smoked for 3 days, that kind of hunger and thirst was hard to resist. Wang Lu still had some food in his mustard seed bag, so he threw a few meat pies to Lu Li, which made her smile. However, the current predicament was still a headache. Really troublesome, we can't just stand still in the second level. Not to mention with the composition of foodies in the team, sooner or later the food will run out. At that time, do I have to rely on my physical advantage of non-phase method to infinitely squeeze out protein to maintain their survival? Wang Lu's thoughts drifted, and soon from the food storage problem to the agricultural breeding problem, he thought that if he brought the crop seeds, as well as breeding pigs and sheep, he could open up a small piece of farmland here to play with the monogatari. Breeding? Wang Lu felt a flash of inspiration in his mind, and suddenly understood the reason why the stone door was closed. So that's how it is. The reason why the number is not enough is because there is an overlap. Wang Lu said, walked to the front of the mottled dog, and then stretched out his foot to kick it. Damn, what are you doing? The dog was sleeping sweetly, so being interrupted made its whole body uncomfortable. I'm looking for you to make up the number. With that, Wang Lu reached out his hand and touched the dog's head. In his jade mansion, a mark disintegrated. That was the master-servant contract between Wang Lu and Quan Zhouhua, which was now unilaterally lifted by Wang Lu. Quan Zhouhua felt that the shackles on its brain suddenly broke, and its whole body suddenly burst out with a bit of vitality, making it feel very comfortable. However, it didn't have the time to experience this. It hurriedly stood up. Damn, do you want to casually abandon a small animal? Rest assured, I'll take care of your food. Wang Lu said, I just need you to become an independent existence to make up the number of people. Wang Lu thought that if the number of people was not recognized, the biggest possibility would be because of the contract between him and Quan Zhouhua. Right now, as his pet, the stupid dog was attached to him. Naturally, it would not be recognized as an independent team, so there were actually only 4 of them. However, as long as the stupid dog was released, with its qualification, how could it not count? And sure enough, when the contract was lifted, the stone door soon opened with a rumbling vibration, revealing a deep and huge maze. A dangerous and mysterious aura hit them in the face. The structure of the maze was breathtaking. Not long after the entrance corridor, in front of them, there was a sudden opening, showing infinite light. A bright and warm sun hung high in the sky. Not only did it not have the gloomy underground city corridor that made people despair, but instead, everything was directly revealed in front of them. Under the clear sky, the open labyrinth was divided into countless small units. Some of the units were empty grasslands, some were deep forests, and some were pitch black even though they were clearly illuminated by the sun. These units were separated by space barriers. Although there was no brick or other fixed-form material, it was more unbreakable than any brick and was difficult to break through with brute force. In front of everyone was a narrow corridor isolated by space barriers. In front of the corridor was the transmission entrance to the first unit. Ayaya, the most troublesome transmission maze. Wang Lu felt annoyed when he saw this scene. Among all the mazes, this kind of transmission maze was the most troublesome one based on complex space spells. Moreover, there was no telling how many sharp traps were arranged in each of the small units. This stage was similar to the first stage, but it was more like a test of the trial taker's patience. Unfortunately, when encountering this level, I am the most impatient type. Wang Lu coldly said and strode forward. Aya curiously asked, how are you going to be impatient? Any maze has a common solution. Dig the wall, dig the ground. While speaking, he launched his original magical ability, and the bloody sky covered an area of 100 feet. Chapter 330. I can't believe you actually came here. While walking on the stairs leading to the 3rd level, Aya has gradually become numb to Wang Lu's maze strategy. In short, it was impossible to expect him to honestly follow the designer's idea. The 2nd level was a very elaborate maze, but he directly used his original magical ability to go all the way, crushing all the space barriers, and directly went to the exit. The whole process took no more than half an hour. Of course, it was also thanks to the fact that there was no administrator who controlled the operation of the maze. Everything was done according to the preset program, lacking the ability to respond to unexpected situations. Wang Lu's original magical ability was undoubtedly an unexpected situation. His original magical ability, according to the law, was equivalent to the inherent enchantment of the Western continent. It belonged to a very rare high-end skill, which had a very unique magical effect in disintegrating space. Of course, if the opponent was a living person, there would naturally be a way to work around it. However, this time, Wang Lu's opponent was a rigid maze. Therefore, the group of people were put into the broken sword world by Wang Lu. As if a space tunnel was opened, they went straight all the way, crossed hundreds of mechanism units, and went straight to the end. This is thanks to the fact that there is no administrator in this level. Wang Lu was not particularly proud of this. After thousands of years, this champion's trial is not perfect anymore, so there's no sense of accomplishment in crushing it. However, I'm afraid the next one is not so easy. Ha! You said, where is the administrator who generously promised to accept the challenge on the 5th floor of the king's treasure house? Wang Lu earnestly said, this champion's trial is essentially the same as the king's treasure house, but the difficulty is higher, and the design is more unique. Then, according to the situation in the king's treasure house, I guess it won't be long before we have to face the Holy Light Religion people. The opponent is a living person, so it's not easy to pass by relying on little tricks. At the same time, in the depths of the king's treasure house, the Holy Light Religion's Holy One was somewhat anxiously waiting for his subordinate's reply. 4 days ago, through the administrator's authority, he saw the experience of Wang Lu and the others at the entrance of the champion's trial. He knew that they were sent to the Ice Thorn Plateau to look for the king's wine cup. After that, he immediately ordered the elite forces of the Inquisition to head to the plateau to hunt down Wang Lu and his party. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, even the head inquisitor himself had personally come out. He was one of the 5 great legendary powers of the church. Although he was the weakest of the 5, he was still powerful enough to crush everything. Logically speaking, the lineup of this operation was luxurious and could be said to be foolproof, but the saints still felt uneasy. What exactly went wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Their operation was very secretive, and only a few saints knew everything. Even the 13 high-grade professionals who participated in the operation did not know what they were going to do in the highlands. At the same time, the church reacted very quickly this time. Because they followed a special procedure, it only took the time of a meal from the order to the mobilization of manpower. On the other hand, it would only take them 3 to 4 days to travel from the Holy City to the Ice Thorns Plateau. Furthermore, with the head Inquisitor, no one within a radius of 10,000 miles would be able to hide. Furthermore, their team's combat power was also completely overwhelming. There was no possibility of anything going wrong. However, just as the saint was feeling worried, an emergency signal was sent. The head Inquisitor's voice rang directly in the saint's soul. It was a little incredulous and a little angry. They disappeared. The administrator was shocked. Disappeared? How? The head Inquisitor said in a deep voice, I also don't know the reason, but in the Book of Purification, their names directly disappeared in an instant. To be able to get rid of the Book of Purification's tracking, it is very likely that they used a powerful teleportation tool and entered an unknown space. Did they discover your existence? The head Inquisitor said. Impossible. My battlefield intuition did not sound the alarm. It is impossible for them to discover us from so far away. If they didn't discover you, why did they run? It's only been 3 days, and they haven't left the Ice Thorns Plateau yet. They simply can't find enough clues to pass. The saint continued to speculate about the various possibilities, but he felt that the situation in front of him was more and more chaotic. Suddenly, a light flashed in front of the saint's eyes, and an incredible idea leaped into his mind. Could it be, then? He did not even care about being rude and threw the head Inquisitor aside. His consciousness sank into an independent space in the king's treasure house, and he used his authority to open a peeping window. Through the window, he saw a scene that made his eyes almost pop out of their sockets. Wang Lu and the others had already passed the 2nd stage and were about to enter the 3rd stage. How was this possible? It had only been 4 days since they entered the Trial of Champions, and they had already passed 2 stages. Was this Trial of Champions really in disrepair? Had it malfunctioned? 90 years ago, how long did it take him to pass the Trial of Champions? 8 years? 10 years? Just the 1st stage, which was to find the wine glasses, took him an entire year as a saint to mobilize the entire church. Although the 2nd stage did not have any life-threatening traps, it was very time-consuming. With 4 of his most trusted subordinates, it took him a year and a half to reach the end. But Wang Lu and the others had passed 2 stages in 4 days. Was there any justice in this world? With strong anger and injustice, the administrator wished he could directly tear open the window and appear in front of that group of people to punish them and catch them all in one fell swoop. However, he had to calm down. Even if he was a legendary level, he would still die if he recklessly acted in the Golden King's treasure house. But should he sit back and watch them continue to advance triumphantly? Absolutely not. Hey, what's wrong? On the other side, the Supreme Inquisitor, who was thousands of miles away, couldn't get a response for a long time, so he somewhat doubtfully asked. The administrator sighed. You guys, come back. The whereabouts of Wang Lu and the others have been found. What? Where? The king's treasure house. The king's treasure house? How could it be? However, the administrator had no intention to explain. He impatiently said, Come back and tell me the details. Upon hearing this, the Supreme Inquisitor was furious. Paul, you motherfasterous cur. You can summon me and send me away at will. Do you think I'm your subordinate? We are both legendary saints of Holy Light religion. Where did your sense of superiority come from? Moreover, if it weren't for the bad information you provided, why would I waste a few days running around? This incompetent waste really makes people want to kill him. In fact, St. Paul, as the administrator of the king's treasure house, has always been a weirdo in the church. Wisdom, temperament, and talent, none of them were outstanding. However, as a professional, his qualifications were amazing, and his luck was also against the heavens' will. Those geniuses of the same generation were submerged in the long river of history, But he, this mediocre talent, stood out and even advanced to the legendary level. Originally, he was the last among the legendary saints of the church. However, 90 years ago, he coincidentally opened the king's treasure house and obtained the administrator's authority, which immediately changed the strategic situation of the Holy Light religion for the next 100 years. Because of this, his status also rose sharply, surpassing the Supreme Inquisitor and the leader of the Bloodlust Holy Knights, ranking third among the 5 legendary saints, second only to the Pope and the Prophet. However, no matter how angry the Supreme Inquisitor was, he knew that this was no longer a personal grudge. The king's treasure house was the core of the church. After 80 years of development, the importance of this place had even surpassed the church's former birthplace, so it absolutely could not be lost. Moreover, the Pope had instructed a few saints in private before. He said that Paul's ability was limited, but his identity was very important. If possible, the others should take care of him and accommodate him. Anyway, Paul seemed to have a high status, but he didn't have much real power in the church. Except for the king's treasure house, he didn't even have an archbishop that he could order around. He could be considered as a loner. At the same time, Paul in the king's treasure house was burning with anxiety. It was already the 3rd level. According to this trend, perhaps the 3rd level wouldn't be a problem for Wang Lu and his group. But once they let him enter the 4th level, it would be a test of life and death. The administrator's authority was obtained by gathering the power of the entire church to pass the first 4 levels and enter the 5th level as a reward. According to the rules of the treasure house, as long as Wang Lu and his group achieved better results than him in the champions trial, they could replace him. What did it mean to be better? If they could pass the 5th level, they would win without any suspense. And even if they couldn't, as long as they passed the 4th level, they would be standing on the same level as Paul. At this time, the comparison would be based on the results of the previous levels. Excellent and good meant the difference in results. Although Paul's results in the past were not bad, how could he be compared with Wang Lu, who passed 2 levels in 4 days? Once Wang Lu passed the 4th level, the administrator's title would definitely fall into his hands. Therefore, when he saw Wang Lu enter the 3rd level, Paul was already impatient. Unfortunately, because of the riots caused by the eastern city-states and the 9 regions people, the Pope and the Prophet had gone to the east to suppress it, and the leader of the Bloodlust Holy Knight was guarding the border. At this time, Paul wanted to ask for help, but he didn't know who to ask. In his view, the problem he encountered as a saint, naturally, only a saint could solve it. Why isn't the Chief Inquisitor here yet? Although he knew that even if the Chief Inquisitor had legendary level strength, it was impossible for him to cross half of the continent in an instant, Paul still couldn't help but resent him. At this time, through the peephole, he saw that Wang Lu and his team had reached the entrance of the 3rd level and began to attack in an orderly manner. And Wang Lu seemed to have a card up his sleeve. Do I have to shed all pretense of cordiality, break the peephole, and directly make a move? In anxiety, Paul even came up with an extreme idea. With his status as an administrator, if he risked being punished by the rules of the treasure house, he could indeed forcibly intervene in the process of Wang Lu's trial and interrupt him. Of course, as the price, the punishment he would receive would also be very severe, but it was better than watching the other party advance triumphantly, right? Thinking of this, Paul finally tried to contact the Pope and the Prophet, but unfortunately, he didn't get a response. And the Chief Inquisitor was still in the distant snowfield. Paul gritted his teeth and decided not to wait for the Chief Inquisitor to come back. Well, I don't recommend making a move at this time. At this time, a gentle voice suddenly came from his side. Paul was shocked. He turned around and saw a pale face without any facial features. Faceless, it's you. Regarding this church's sharpest knife, Paul's feelings were slightly complicated. On the one hand, Faceless One's position in the church was very special. Although his rank was below the 5 saints, only the Prophet and the Pope had the right to dispatch him. Other than that, he didn't listen to anyone. His real status even faintly suppressed Paul, which made people couldn't help but feel awe. Moreover, Faceless One had once directly or indirectly helped him. But on the other hand, Faceless One was not a legend. Facing Faceless One, Paul always felt a sense of superiority. Faceless One didn't care about the other's psychological activities at all. He just lightly explained, if you make a move now, it will be completely contrary to the current situation. The entire treasure house will become your resistance, which may be exactly what they want. It's better to wait until they reach the 4th level. We can integrate more forces in the next few days. Moreover, In the fourth level, we can reasonably intervene without worrying about the treasure house's resistance. But in the fourth level, we have no way out. Why would there be a need to retreat in a battle that is bound to be won? Faceless One lightly asked. Paul was startled, but then he quickly thought of something and said, "Very well, then I'll do as you say." "If there's any mistake," Faceless One coldly said, "if there's really a mistake, even if you push all the responsibility on me, you'll lose the treasure house's administrator authority and are nothing more than a waste. So, use your poor brain power on the right place, think less of useless things." "How dare you talk to me like that?" Paul flew into a rage. "Don't forget who made you stand here. 90 years ago, based on your words, how dare you hope to reach the fifth level on the road of trial?" Faceless One lightly said, "So sit down, shut your mouth, and listen to me carefully. This time, you're the one who needs my help. Remember this." Paul's heart was extremely angry. However, seeing that pale face, a throbbing feeling from the depths of his soul was like a bucket of cold water poured on his head, making him unable to say anything more. Chapter 331. Tisk. It's a disturbing piece. Walking on the dazzling stairs, looking at the light at the exit in front of them, Wang Lu could not help but sigh. After passing through the second level of the labyrinth, the group set out for the third level. In the road of the championship trial, there was a long shining staircase between each level. Wang Lu had always suspected that the people of Holy Light religion might not be able to bear it and would make their move at this time. However, all the way to the end, they didn't encounter the expected obstruction. Holy Light religion seemed to be ignorant of the fact that Wang Lu had passed 2 levels in a row. Although no one would hinder him, which would only make his strategy smoother, Wang Lu still felt somewhat uneasy. At this time, Lu Li, who had the most amazing eyesight in the team, had already seen the scenery at the end. She happily said, "I see the stone door, and there are words written on it. It's the ancient language of the Western continent. It seems to be military strategy?" Wang Lu was surprised. "You actually know the ancient language of the Western continent?" Lu Li giggled and said, "Aya gave me an ancient language dictionary a few days ago, and I have memorized it all." "Good, you're indeed the strongest brain," Wang Lu commented, and at the same time, he also saw the scenery at the end. In front of them, on the surface of a gray stone door, there was indeed the word military strategy written in quaint handwriting. Military strategy. Does it mean the point of this level is to show military strategy? Wang Lu said as he crossed the last step of the shining staircase and officially stepped on the square in front of the door. Before his voice fell, he heard a dull sound in front of him. "Yes, the point of this level is to show military strategy." While speaking, a wave-like ripple rippled on the surface of the stone door. Wang Lu smiled. "Are you also punished to guard the door here because you lost Golden King's treasure?" The stone door said, "Me? I lost a bet to Golden King and can't pay the bet, so I can only come here to accept my punishment." Although the sound of this stone door was dull, its character was much more lively and talkative than the first stone door. "I was once the leader of a tribe and commanded a powerful army. I fought all over the place and conquered a large territory. Because I won every battle, I was given the title of God of War. Unfortunately, I later met the Golden King. His country and army were far superior to mine. I knew that I could not be his opponent in a head-on fight, so I made a bet with him. Both sides would bring the same-sized army to fight in the Doomsday Mountain. If I won, his army would not be able to cross my border. If I lost, I would surrender on the spot. You can kill me if you want." At that time, I was confident that my ability to command was unparalleled in the world. Even the Golden King would not be able to beat me if the size of his army was the same as mine. Unfortunately, in the Battle of the Doomsday Mountain Range, I was defeated by him and had to surrender. At that time, I heard that Golden King was cruel and heartless, so I thought I was going to die. However, he said that as a bastard, my military talent was rare in the world, so it would be a pity to kill me. When I heard that this seemed to be the hope of survival, I hurriedly expressed my willingness to use my talent for him. If there is any enemy, just leave it to me. In any case, although I can't beat the Golden King, I can still win every battle if I meet other people. However, Golden King sneered at this and said that if I could find an enemy worthy of his conquest, it would be considered as a meritorious deed for him. At that time, I knew that my tribe was the only force on the continent that had not surrendered to him. Upon hearing this, the others didn't have much reaction, but Aya was surprised. The last tribe conquered by Golden King. You are the barbarian god of war, Tanu? Oh, I can't believe that there are still people who remember my name. The stone door Tanu looked very happy. Ha ha ha, sure enough, the longer you live, the easier it is to encounter surprises. At that time, I said that I was willing to offer my ability, but Golden King said that there was no opponent worthy of his conquest on the continent. My ability was useless, so he suppressed me in his treasure house to guard the door. Although it was a punishment, it allowed me to stay alive in the form of a stone door for thousands of years. It's more like a reward from Golden King. Ha ha ha. All right, let's get back to business. Tanu restrained his smile and seriously said, "This test is about your strategic ability. I will provide you with an army, and you just need to command these troops to defeat the opponent. That's simple, right?" Wang Lu asked. Simple? The opponent won't be you, right? Tanu laughed. Of course it's me, otherwise, who else could it be? But don't worry, I'm here to guard the door, not to bully people. I don't bring a lot of troops, only 400 golden guardians, 30 golden warlocks, and 8 legion commanders. Moreover, I won't be here myself. How many troops do we have? That depends on you, Tanu said, and then ripples appeared on the surface of his body, presenting a table. Wang Lu identified the handwriting on the table and said with some surprise, Golden Guardians, 10 logistics points, Golden Warlocks, 20 logistics points, Legion Commanders, 50 logistics points. In addition, there are archers, chariots, strange beast cavalry, and the required logistics points are different. Is this a certain number of logistics points, and then we are free to form an army? Tanu said, yes, the core of the army is the guarantee of logistics and food. Only with a strong logistics ability can a huge army be supported. Wang Lu nodded and said, this design is reasonable. In short, it's similar to an upper limit of population. You have 400 Golden Guardians, 30 Warlocks, and 8 Commanders, which means 5,000 logistics points. Then how many do we have? Tanu said, it also depends on you. Here, look here. While they were talking, a stone platform rose in front of the stone door. On the platform, there was a chessboard with many small squares painted on it. On it, there were 2 chess pieces and several dice. Wang Lu leaned forward and looked at it for a while. He saw that there was a zigzagging square on the chessboard. The square was connected from end to form a ring. Most of the squares were written with different numbers, and some were painted with a single color. In addition to chess pieces and dice, there were several stacks of cards on the chessboard, and there were also some exquisite small building models. Seeing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but change his expression. This is, Tanu said with a smile. This is a very popular game on the continent when I was alive. It's called Simulation Business Chess. Simulation, your sister. Isn't this clearly a monopoly? Wang Lu pointed at the chessboard. Isn't it just buying land, collecting taxes, and then using various events and props to harm people? Tanu was surprised and said, I can't believe that even you aliens from the East know about this game. Forget it. I'll just think of it as a beautiful coincidence. The world is big, and there are always a few nerds who are stupid enough to design tabletop games. In short, you mean that I want to play Monopoly with you, and then use the points to determine my logistics points? Tanu said, that's right, so the amount of logistics points depends on you. Of course, I won't bully people, so even if you lose miserably in simulation business chess, I will at least give you 5,000 basic points to ensure that you have the same number of troops as me. And on this basis, if you have the ability, win all 20,000 points in my hand within 100 rounds. By then, you will have more than 10 times the number of troops I have. However, I doubt if you can do it. Gentle reminder, when playing chess, you'd better protect yourself with all your strength. Protect the 5,000 points in your hand and don't lose them. Haha. Obviously, this former tribal god of war was extremely confident in his chess skills. Interesting, you actually dare to show off your gaming talent in front of me. Wang Lu sneered and walked to the front of the stone table. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. After an hour. This is impossible? Tanu's shocked voice echoed in the narrow space. On the chessboard, the red color chosen by Wang Lu occupied more than 90% of the area. Tanu's blue color could only occupy a corner, and his own chess piece was wrapped in red, unable to move an inch. With the result of the dice roll just now, his chess piece moved to the red square, so the last hope of turning the tables disappeared. Wang Lu sighed softly, stood up from the stone table, and scattered the gemstones in his hand on the chessboard. The 93rd round of the game is over. 25,000 points are in my hand. Humph, I can't believe that the barbarian god of war is so tenacious, to be able to hold on until the end before dying. This is impossible. Tanu's voice trembled, he still couldn't believe what just happened. As a gatekeeper on this trial path, he had guarded it alone for more than 10,000 years. During this period of time, his only entertainment was playing chess with the other gatekeepers who still had some intelligence. 10,000 years was enough for him to hone his chess skills to the point of perfection. However, as time passed, more and more gatekeepers died, and he had no way to display his brilliant chess skills, which made him feel even more lonely. More than 80 years ago, he unexpectedly met a group of challengers from the outside. Tanu was ecstatic and generously gave them 10 chances to try, but in fact, he just wanted to play a few more rounds with them. But the best result of those challengers was to desperately protect their 5,000 points, and then with the same number of troops and a more reasonable combination of troops, they narrowly defeated Tanu. Therefore, Tanu never thought that he would lose, and lose so miserably. If he wasn't just a stone door, this extremely shocking fact would have exploded his head on the spot. Fortunately, he didn't have a head now. What trick did you use? Wang Lu sneered, the chessboard is yours, the chess pieces are yours, and the dice are also yours. What trick can I use? As he said, he played with the chess pieces on the chessboard and asked, what do you think of my chess skills? Tanu said unwillingly, far better than me. Wang Lu said, then logically speaking, there are actually 2 possibilities. First, I'm too strong, and my talent in this kind of game has reached the realm of God, and no one can stop me. Second, it's not that I'm too strong, it's that you're too weak. I'm too weak. Tanu suddenly felt a sense of humiliation from being looked down upon. Don't go too far. Go too far? I actually didn't have much contact with your business simulation chess, and I'm not interested in it, so I'm definitely not good at it. Not to mention that the rules of your game are still the original version from 10,000 years ago, and there are many differences from what I've played, so I need some time to get used to it. Even so, I still defeated you with an overwhelming advantage. Is this really because I'm too strong? Speaking of which, where did you get the confidence to think that you're very good at chess? Tanu somewhat dejectedly said, before you, I've never tasted defeat in 10,000 years. Then there are 2 possibilities. First, you're very strong. Second, your opponents are too weak. Objectively speaking, what kind of people have been playing chess with you for the past 10,000 years? Are they the chess masters that Golden King collected from all over the continent? Or are they a group of ordinary people who have no interest in chess and can't stand your coaxing and pestering? And did the last trial taker who came here look like he was good at chess? But I've been playing here for 10,000 years. Wang Lu sighed, you've locked 2 men in a secret room, and even after 100,000 years, they still can't give birth to a child. It can be seen that time is not omnipotent. Moreover, when you play chess with a group of mediocre players, the more you play, the worse your chess skills will get. Your job is to be a military god, not a chess master. If you spend too much energy on this kind of heresy, you'll become a laughingstock just like the Night King who is obsessed with dark cuisine. The Night King who was obsessed with dark cuisine was shocked and angry at the same time. Hey! Chapter 332. No matter how unwilling the military god Tanu was, a loss was a loss. In the past, the military god would never go back on his word in the game. Well then, according to the agreement, you have a total of 25,000 logistic points. Please distribute your points freely. With that, on the stone platform that originally carried the chessboard, a complicated table appeared. All the units that could be exchanged and their detailed information were recorded on it. While looking at it, Wang Lu carefully calculated the optimal plan for the unit combination. However, halfway through the calculation, his eyes swept across a line on the table and was taken aback. Wait a minute, how come even I am printed on the table? Tanu said, of course. Don't tell me you won't participate in the battle? And if you participate in the battle, won't you consume your supplies? So that's how it is. Even the commander can't just watch from the sidelines. Tanu said, those commanders who don't even dare to come to the front line are not qualified to command the army of Golden King. I understand. Wang Lu nodded his head and didn't want to be entangled with him. Since the other party had set the rules, he just had to abide by it. However, when he saw his exchange price of 500 logistic points on the table, Wang Lu frowned. How come I don't know that I'm so valuable? I can buy 10 golden commanders. The exchange price is based on the strength of a person. You are worth 500 logistic points, that is to say, you alone are worth 10 golden commanders. Wang Lu thought for a moment. It seemed that it was not wrong to say that he could fight 10 golden commanders at the same time. Because even if he encountered 10 golden commanders, he would still be in an invincible position with his non-phase sword defense. However, 500 logistic points was still a bit expensive. Why not change it to someone else? It's okay to change people, but only those who personally set foot on the battlefield are eligible to pass the test. Those who watch the whole process from a safe place outside the battlefield will stay in a safe place forever. That is to say, let alone changing people, the 5 of us must go to the battlefield together to pass the test? And according to my price, the 5 of us will have to deduct at least 2,000 logistic points. Wang Lu thought for a moment. What about you? As the god of war of the barbarian race, how many logistical points will it take for you to personally go into battle? Tanu said confidently, of course it's 0 points. I'm just a stone gate now, and I have no combat ability at all. Even if I personally go into battle, I'm just a projection without any combat ability, so the logistical points are not counted at all. If you are envious, then beg Golden King to make you into a stone gate. Forget it, I'll just treat these 2,000 points as feeding the dogs. As Wang Lu spoke, he continued to scroll down the form, preparing to inquire about the detailed exchange prices of Aya and the others. However, he was stunned at a glance. This 1 0, 2 zeros, 3 zeros. 10,000 points? What kind of price is that? Wang Lu was furious. Are you the gate of the airport? How could the prices be so inflated? A mere Night King actually requires 10,000 logistics points. Tanu was also surprised. So expensive? It seems like your Night King has a great background. 10,000 points per unit, that's the price of a legend. Bullshit legend. Seeing that the other party's value was 20 times higher than his, Wang Lu was flustered and exasperated. He unceremoniously criticized and slandered. She's just a waste who can't even make Yuxiang shredded pork. I, the team leader, only have 500 points. I think giving her 300 is enough. Aya's face turned blue with anger. So that's what you really mean? Tanu explained, the price of this logistical point is mainly calculated according to the peak strength. Although this little girl is not in good condition at this time, if she returns to her peak state, she should be able to match a legend. Wang Lu unhappily snorted for a while, and then accepted this explanation for the time being. Alas, a hero with low health is really useless. Instead of keeping her population, it's better to make up for it. Wang Lu said as he continued to look down the form. Then once again, he flew into a rage. F***CK. Were you attacked by Golden King because of your black heart? My Night King only has 10,000 points, but even Lu Li's price is 10,000? Does she deserve to be a legend? Or is it because she is close to Aya, so the price goes up? Tanu was also surprised. Her value is also 10,000 points? That doesn't make sense. Her real strength can only be regarded as intermediate high level, at most 1 or 2,000. Is it because of another reason? What? The logistical point, in essence, calculates the logistical consumption. Although because of the trial, the price is based on a unit's combat strength, but its logistical consumption is also an important factor that affects the price. Perhaps, the reason why this girl's value is so high is because of the amazing logistical consumption? Wang Lu was dumbfounded, because what Tanu said was very likely. Lu Li's cultivation time was still short, so her potential was far from being displayed. In terms of strength alone, she was far from worthy of 10,000 logistical points. However, she could eat a lot. Damn it, what's the point of this? 2 women have already taken up 20,000 points. I have 500 points. Then Little Bai has 600 points. And the stupid dog has 2,400 points? Are you guys trying to rebel? Each one of you is so expensive. There are only 1,500 points left. At most, I can only buy a few laborers. Wait a minute, are those people who tried to pass the trial also based on this standard? They only have a total of 5,000 points, right? Tanu was somewhat embarrassed. The specific calculation is done by the spell mechanism that Golden King left here. If you're not convinced, why don't you talk to Golden King about it? Talk your ass. Are those Holy Light Religion challengers also based on this standard? Their total score is only 5,000 points, right? Tanu said, it's the same standard as yours. Among them, the most valuable legendary rank has 8,000 points, which is probably a bit lower than the average legendary rank. Therefore, he couldn't participate in that battle. Someone else led a large number of legions to participate in the battle. Wang Lu asked, but since those who don't participate in the battle can't pass the trial, then after that? Tanu explained, no, this rule is something that I made later. Because I found that the cheering faces of those onlookers were very hateful, so I simply forbade the onlookers to pass the trial. You can actually change the rules at will? Originally, I couldn't, but I don't know how I slowly could. Wang Lu couldn't help but sigh. Things that had been in disrepair for a long time were really not good. Letting this Tanu casually change the rules, the original intention of this trial to test strategy was completely gone. However, as long as he could pass the trial, why should he care about whether it was strategy or moral integrity? Forget it, 1,500 points is 1,500 points. I admit it. Wang Lu sighed and helplessly looked at Aya and Lu Li. It seems like I'm doomed to face the war of thousands of troops alone, because the rations of our thousands of troops have been eaten up by these two women. In the face of Wang Lu's naked resentment, although Aya felt wronged, she had nothing to say. Lu Li quietly hid behind Aya, not daring to look directly at Wang Lu's eyes, and then, as if burying one's ears while stealing a bell, stealthily took a bite of the pie. Regarding Lu Li's behavior, Wang Lu didn't even have the strength to be angry. After casually tapping a few times on the table and distributing the remaining 1,500 points, he sneered. It's nothing more than changing the strategy game to a matchless mowing the grass game. But as long as it's a game, even if it's a fujoshi, I will still pass it for you to see. Military god Tanu, bring it on. Good. Tanu let out a long laugh. His voice was filled with indescribable joy. Although the strength of the young man before him was not very strong, his heroic spirit made him somewhat sympathize with him. And for an opponent who sympathized with him, according to the rules of the barbarian tribe, he should use his greatest strength to defeat and crush the opponent. In the past, when he received the last batch of challengers, because he naturally hated the opposite party, he only used 80 to 90% of his strength, which gave them the chance to win by a narrow margin. But this time, in the face of Wang Lu, he must come up with 20% of his strength. Amidst the laughter, Wang Lu felt that everything in front of him began to distort and change. The narrow square in front of the door was replaced by a vast plain. On the other side of the plain were hundreds of golden guardians, and the phantom of the military god Tanu was surrounded by them. It was a barbarian giant with an astonishing imposing manner. His huge body and resolute face were like an immutable mountain rock. Outside the door, Tanu was still laughing and laughing, looking relaxed and cheerful. However, once he entered the battlefield, all the superfluous emotions were obliterated, leaving only the cold and harsh atmosphere. What a powerful military formation! In the face of the military god Tanu, who was only defeated by Golden King, Aya could not help but exclaim in admiration. As a leader, before the real battle, even if she just looked at the opponent's formation from afar, she could estimate the general strength. How is it compared to you? Wang Lu asked. Aya was silent for a moment. In terms of military formation alone, I am not as good as him. If you don't consider the strength of the commander, the gap between the two sides is about 8-10. Wang Lu was surprised. That's 20% better than you? That's true in terms of military formation alone, but if I really meet him, under fair conditions, I am confident that I can win. Wang Lu said. Do you want to charge the enemy alone? Unfortunately, this time there is no enemy for you to fight. The other side is just a phantom. I'm afraid you can't kill him. If you want to win, the only way is to wipe out the enemy. Aya said, it's a pity that I'm still a bit far from being able to freely use my strength. I can do it with 1 or 2 sword strikes, but it's difficult to sustain. And it's impossible to destroy 400 golden guardians with just 1 or 2 sword strikes. In terms of attack and defense attributes alone, the golden guardians were close to the king pill level. And 400 golden guardians, under the command of a commander who was proficient in military formation, had unparalleled power. Unless Aya recovered to her peak state, she could barely suppress them with her real legendary power. But right now, in this kind of weak state, rushing forward was simply courting death. In addition to Aya, the others didn't have the capital to fight against 100 golden guardians. Therefore, Wang Lu nodded. In that case, let's change the way we play. Aya, you are the one who has led the army, so you will command the people behind us. Aya was surprised. The people behind us? You also exchanged the remaining 1,500 points for the army? Looking back, Aya was even more surprised, because behind them, there were 1,500 strong laborers silently waiting for orders. You actually exchanged them for laborers. Yes, laborers that can be exchanged with only one logistics point. They have the physical fitness of a middle-order profession and excellent production and construction ability. In the past, when Golden King went on an expedition to the Savage Land, he wanted to watch an opera on the way. So he let his hard workers build a magnificent and exquisitely carved theater in the Gobi Desert within an hour. The interior of the theater could accommodate tens of thousands of people. At that time, there were only 100 laborers responsible for the construction. Aya had also heard of this story. She was deeply impressed. Golden King's elite army is indeed a well-deserved reputation. But what's the use of so many laborers? Wang Lu lightly said, to build a tower. Chapter 333. Build a tower? When she heard Wang Lu's answer, Aya actually had a vague speculation in her heart. It was nothing more than using the strength of hard labor to quickly build a defensive tower. However, the more she thought about it, the more she couldn't figure it out. What kind of tower do you want to build? How do you want to build it? When do you want to build it? The first question was, what kind of defensive tower should be built in order to block the opponent? The opponent was 400 golden guardians whose strength was close to that of King Pill. When they were in a dense formation, they looked like ordinary infantry, but once the battle started, each of them could go up to the sky or down to the ground. Ordinary bunkers and defensive towers might have a miraculous effect in the mortal world, but here, they were meaningless. The full blow of the Golden Guardians could even destroy 10 towers. The second question was, even if Wang Lu had the god-level blueprint to build a super defensive tower that could withstand the Golden Guardians, what about the materials? A clever housewife can't cook without rice. No matter how capable Golden King's hard labor was, it was impossible for them to build an air tower, right? The third question was, even if Wang Lu could solve the material problem, what about the construction time? No matter how efficient Golden King's hard labor was, it was impossible for it to be completed in an instant, and would Tanu give him the time? The first question you shouldn't ask me, you should ask these hard labor. They are the elite hard labor who are fortunate enough to serve Golden King, and have undergone the most rigorous architectural training. It's impossible that they can't even build a few practical defensive towers, right? Besides, even if they can't, I still have a few Dragon Tower blueprints, which are enough to kill all living beings. Aya was shocked. Dragon Tower blueprints. Where did you get the Dragon Tower blueprints? That's one of the top secrets of the Breton Dragon clan. Dragon Tower was a treasure-level building invented by a group of architecture-loving scholars in the heyday of the Breton Dragon clan. Dragon Tower had the ability to defend itself. Without manual operation, it could automatically identify the enemy and use various means to fight the enemy. Depending on the different building materials, the strength it could display would vary from a beginner to a high-order profession. Of course, the Dragon Tower that could be comparable to a high-order profession was so expensive that even the Dragon clan could not afford it. However, the lower-level Dragon Tower was very practical. For example, the Green Dragon Pagoda, which was the most cost-effective, could be built with materials that cost around 500 to 600 spirit stones, magic coins. But its power was enough to rival a cultivator at the peak of the foundation establishment stage and was close to the shoot-on stage. Even cultivators who had just entered the King Pill realm would have to avoid the concentrated fire of dozens of dragon pagodas. The only problem was that the technology required to build a dragon pagoda was too complex. Even among the Dragon clan, the number of people who were proficient in construction could be counted on one's fingers. In Aya's era, the craftsmen who could build a dragon pagoda were almost extinct. In addition, Aya spent her entire life fighting, attacking more than defending, so this kind of defensive weapon was not very useful. Thus, the Dragon Pagoda blueprint was shelved. However, that was still a treasure of the Dragon clan, one of the most valuable treasures in the inheritance. How did it fall into the hands of Wang Lu? Wang Lu said, "Of course, it was found in the treasure house of Dragon City. In the years that you were away, Bedivere, as the only remaining guardian of Breton Dragon Clan, collected a lot of Dragon Clan's heritage, and this Dragon Tower blueprint is one of them." "Of course I know that. But, how could Bedivere let you into the treasure house?" Aya was somewhat in disbelief. "It's not that I don't trust you, but Bedivere should know what the Breton Dragon Clan's heritage means. Except for me, even his wife is not allowed to enter the treasure house." Wang Lu said, "I told him that I'm your gigolo." "And then he let you in?" "Of course not. Bedivere is such a strict person. How could he break the rules just because I'm a mere gigolo? But I also told him that our child will be born next year, so I intend to give the child a gift, and also give you a big surprise." Upon hearing Wang Lu's explanation, Aya was petrified and motionless. Wang Lu said, "So I asked him to recommend the good things in the treasure house, and he recommended the Dragon Pagoda blueprint. He said that if I can build a Dragon Pagoda according to the blueprint, even if it's the lowest level Bone Dragon Pagoda, as the guardian of the newborn child, it will make you very happy." Now it seems like Bedivere has really made a great contribution. Aya didn't even have the strength to speak. As for your second problem, materials, it was also Bedivere who helped to solve it. Under the oppression of Holy Light religion, his biggest need is self-defense, and Dragon Pagoda is his first choice as a defensive weapon. Over the years, he has accumulated a lot of materials, but he has always lacked craftsmen who can build it. During this period, he reluctantly recruited some, but they were soon corrupted by Holy Light religion. And because of the secrecy of the construction of Dragon Pagoda, he didn't dare to let Holy Light religion know about it. Therefore, the construction has never been successful. At that time, when I asked for the blueprint, he also gave me a lot of materials. Fortunately, my mustard seed bag is big enough. Ha ha ha. As for the third problem, the construction time is indeed a problem. What kind of person is Tanu? How could he not see through my trick? However, even if he can see through it, so what? As long as he personally goes into action, those mere puppets would be as vulnerable as clay chickens and pottery dogs. You personally go into action? Don't tell me you want to use your original magical ability to slow them down? That's impossible. The difference in strength is too big. The difference in strength is too big. Wang Lu smiled. I am in shoot on stage. During this period of time in the Western continent, I have made some progress, so I can barely be regarded as a high-level shoot-on. But my real defense is invincible below Yuanying stage. And the opposite side is just a group of puppets suspected to be the King Pill. Aya said, "It's a group, not a single one." But, if they can't even break the defense, what's the difference between a group and a single one? Tanu is a master of military tactics, so it's impossible for his soldiers to be in a state of disunity. Once their power is integrated, with 400 people working together, even a Yuanying stage cultivator would not be able to face them head-on. Ha ha ha, do you think I will give them the opportunity to integrate their power? You underestimate the Void Spirit root too much. Even in the Western continent, I still have a way to make them in a state of disunity. No matter how great my ability is, I can't do it. Humph, it's time to show my real skill. Wang Lu. Aya furrowed her brows and inwardly lamented that she really couldn't see through him. Indeed, Wang Lu never did things that he was not sure of. His confidence now must have something to rely on. However, Aya could clearly see that Wang Lu didn't have enough strength to contend against 400 golden guardians. Both of them came down from the Spirit Sword Mountain, so Aya basically knew his cards. Don't worry, don't forget that I'm your way to win the war. Otherwise, let's make a bet. If I can single-handedly delay them long enough, you have to give me something. What do you think? Aya asked, "What do you want?" "I haven't thought about it yet. Why don't you put it on my tab first?" "You? Okay, it's a deal. Wait for me to come back." With that, Wang Lu no longer paid attention to Aya. His feet touched the ground and went straight to the other side of the plain, where the army of the military god Tanu was. He was really alone in facing thousands of troops. However, Tanu seemed to have predicted this. The moment Wang Lu set off, he issued an order. Disperse. With that order, the 400 golden guardians dispersed, never giving the opponent a chance to catch them all. In this regard, Wang Lu couldn't help but admire the opponent's caution and keenness. His plan to capture a large number of enemies with his original magical ability had failed before it even started. However, so what if the formation dispersed? Because his goal was not actually the Golden Guardians and Golden Warlocks, these miscellaneous soldiers. He went straight in with only one goal: Tanu himself. As long as he dealt with this military god, the 400 Golden Guardians would just be like a plate of loose sand, a fish on the chopping board. However, Tanu's phantom was indifferent to this, letting Wang Lu break into the formation with irresistible force. Some of the nearby Golden Guardians formed groups of 2 or 3 and cooperated to intercept him. Under the command of Tanu, these Golden Guardians cooperated with each other, which doubled their strength. However, they were all easily bounced off by the sword of Mount Kuan, completely unable to slow down Wang Lu's pace. As for Tanu himself, he led a few dozens of Golden Guardians and stood motionless, as if he was waiting for Chu Yunqing's arrival. From that pair of cold eyes, Wang Lu couldn't read any of the opponent's psychological fluctuations. Tanu in the state of the military god was like a precise clock. Every action of his had a clear purpose, and any external attack could not shake his stability. Therefore, Wang Lu couldn't even tell if Tanu had set a trap for him to fall into, or if he was just bluffing. However, no matter what it was, how could an arrow that had been shot go back? Wang Lu took a step forward and arrived in front of the army. In the middle of the army, Tanu also gently opened his mouth, ready to issue a new order. According to Wang Lu's guess, it was very likely that the whole army would attack, bypassing Wang Lu and directly attacking the 1,500 hard laborers. Because no matter what Wang Lu's battle plan was, the core and key was those hard laborers. As long as they were killed, no matter how many tricks Wang Lu had, he wouldn't be able to come up with them. It was a drastic response. And at this time, because the Golden Guardians were scattered, it was impossible for Wang Lu to lock all of them in his original magical ability. Not to mention that with his current cultivation base, his original magical ability could not possibly contain hundreds of Golden Guardians at the same time. However, Wang Lu didn't come to fight head-on. He put his hand into his pouch, took out an exquisite gold medal and raised it up high. In the next moment, an astonishing aura and pressure suddenly burst out from the gold medal, like an invisible ripple sweeping out in all directions. In an instant, the sky of the entire battlefield seemed to be pressed down by a lot. A supreme majestic voice descended from the sky, shaking everyone's heart. "Bastards, kneel!" At the same time, the army of military god Tanu knelt on the ground, without any resistance. Under this change, military god Tanu's complexion finally changed slightly. His sharp eyes pierced the gold medal. Apparently, he had seen through Wang Lu's trick. Unfortunately, if Tanu was not a phantom, but his real body, his gaze would be enough to pierce through the gold medal. Unfortunately, he was powerless at this time. On the battlefield, he was indeed the commander of an army, but the army under his command was, after all, someone else's army. Seeing that the battlefield quieted down in an instant, Wang Lu also gently breathed a sigh of relief. When I saw the dignified barbarian military god using the army of Golden King, I knew that it's time to show my real knockoff skills. Chapter 334. The gold medal was of course fake. The token that symbolized the supreme authority of Golden King. In the tens of thousands of years of rule of Golden King, only a few dozen pieces were issued. For Golden King, who loved absolute centralization of power, putting the authority in the hands of others was simply perverse and intolerable. Therefore, in history, only a few golden tokens were known as rare treasures with great research value and collection value. And any rare treasure, if it was known by a counterfeit grandmaster, there would only be one end. This gold medal had already been made when Wang Lu forged the Golden King's wine cup. The appearance of the gold medal was restored through a large number of historical materials, while the voice and aura of the Golden King were gradually imitated by Wang Lu in several conversations with the Golden King. Although there were not too many similarities, it did have a bit of the unique charm of the Golden King. Wang Lu raised the token high. Under the faint majesty that was vaguely similar to that of Golden King, the army of the military god Tanu collapsed on the spot. All of them knelt on the ground, and no one dared to get up. The army of Golden King couldn't even recognize the token of their lord. This was undoubtedly a tragedy, but it was also an unavoidable tragedy, because for these puppets, the nature of obedience overwhelmed everything. If it was the real army of Golden King, they would never be fooled so easily. Unfortunately, after tens of thousands of years, The brave men who once followed Golden King were only the remains of the puppets, and these puppets had never seen their king since they were born. For Wang Lu, this scene meant that his tactic was a great success, and the counterfeit skill had once again created a miracle. Of course, the counterfeit thing was not glorious, but if the counterfeit could also play the role of the real thing, then whether it was real or fake was no longer important. Wang Lu held the token high and no longer said a word. He just silently let these golden guards kneel down. This gold medal was, after all, a fake. It could only scare these puppets by surprise. But after a long time, no matter how stupid the puppets were, they would still be able to see the clues. Therefore it was better to talk less. In any case, the historical Golden King was not known for being talkative. Time slipped away bit by bit. Wang Lu quietly held the token. In front of him, the 400 scattered golden guards, 30 golden warlocks, and 8 golden commanders were quietly kneeling on the ground. Their foreheads were deeply buried in the soil, not daring to look directly at the light that belonged to the Golden King. Only Tanu remained standing, quietly waiting for the time to pass. For this precise war machine, feudal resistance was just a waste of time. He had asked the Golden Guardians to stand up several times, but he did not get any response, so he gave up trying. In any case, the effects of the counterfeit wouldn't last for too long. As time passed, the puppets would eventually notice that something was amiss. As expected, about 4 to 6 hours later, one of the commanders moved slightly and started to waver. For the loyal puppets, being able to kneel in front of the Golden King's token was a great gift. Under normal circumstances, even if they collapsed, they would not dare to move. But now, it was obvious that they began to doubt the authority of the gold medal. The commander of the legion had a higher degree of wisdom. Soon, the second and third commanders began to waver. After a while, they simply stood up and glared at Wang Lu. Their eyes were like burning lava. Forging the Golden King's token was undoubtedly a blasphemy. An unforgivable blasphemy. Roar! One of the commanders roared to the sky. The angry sound wave swept across, causing all the golden guards to tremble. They slowly stood up and raised their heads. Their eyes became even more confused. Seeing this scene, Wang Lu smiled, threw away the token, and then turned away. Behind him was a jungle of steel and rocks. Ha ha ha! Welcome to my tower defense world. Hundreds and thousands of defense towers of different shapes were intertwined into a complex maze. The dark and solid bone dragon tower, the deep blue-green dragon tower, the manic and unruly red dragon tower, the mysterious black dragon tower, and the holy and radiant holy dragon tower. At this moment, the crystallization of Breton dragon clan's wisdom was undoubtedly revealed. Hundreds and thousands of dragon towers stood side by side, their imposing manner connected, as if it was really an ancient dragon's cave. Even if they were only looking at it from a distance, it made people feel suffocated. This was a real land of death. Even if it was the Golden Guards under the command of the military god Tanu, if they dared to enter the jungle of the defense towers, they would still die. Perhaps before these defense towers were formed, they could disintegrate the opponent with a casual impact, but they had wasted too much time. God of War Tanu, don't just stand there, come and fight to the death. We only have 5 people, if you can rush over, you will win. At this time, Wang Lu had walked into the encirclement of the defense towers and reunited with Aya and the others, while those hard workers had disappeared without a trace. Previously, in order to speed up the work, Wang Lu had ordered them to burn their lives just like the painstaking writer whose deadline was tomorrow but had not written a single word. In one sentence, these amazingly efficient workers burst out with a heaven-defying speed. In just a few hours, they had built a jungle of steel and rocks in a blank space. When the jungle of the defense towers was finally built, the huge building materials in the mustard seed bag were exhausted, and even the mountain not far away was hollowed out. These hard workers finally reached the last moment of their lives. As if they had been burned out, they vanished in a puff of smoke. And the defense towers they left behind were like towering tombstones. In this regard, after a moment of astonishment, a faint smile unexpectedly appeared on the face of the military god Tanu. At this point, even if the military god Tanu's military tactics were twice as powerful, it was impossible for him to rush down the jungle of defense towers with his more than 400 infantrymen. If the commanders were replaced, it would be more likely to be a super long-range artillery. But since the defeat had been decided, the outcome was not so important. Tanu was more concerned about the means by which Wang Lu won. Interesting. This was a heartfelt praise. He had seen too many scenes in his life, but the scene in front of him still made him feel fresh. Very interesting tactics. Very interesting opponents. Strictly speaking, Wang Lu had an unfair advantage because he did not show any talent in strategy at all. However, Tanu had never been a person who was too obsessed with victory and defeat. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to survive as a guardian in the Golden King's treasure house for tens of thousands of years. You win this round, Tanu said. Wang Lu was surprised. You just give up like that? Tanu said, if I have a 1% chance of winning this battle, I will definitely fight it out. But since it's not even 1%, I really don't need to let these soldiers die in vain. In the endless years to come, only they can accompany me. Wang Lu nodded and said no more. After the military god Tanu admitted defeat, a dark door opened behind him. Go, I wish you good luck. When Wang Lu and the others walked through the door and stepped on the shining stairs to the next level, the door slowly closed. At this time, Wang Lu, who was walking at the front of the team, suddenly felt something. He looked back and saw the collapsed world through the gap of the door. On the battlefield just now, the sky was broken, the earth was collapsing, and huge cracks opened up, like the mouth of a wild beast, tearing and swallowing the world little by little. The military god Tanu stood in the middle of the army, his posture like a pine tree, calmly welcoming the end of the world. Is this what the so-called endless years refer to? Wang Lu could not help but be stunned. And Aya, who was behind Wang Lu, felt Wang Lu's gaze and also looked back. At this time, the door suddenly closed. What a pity, if there is another chance, I really want to have a fair fight with him. Aya said regretfully. Yes, what a pity. Wang Lu said softly. At the same time, in the depths of the king's treasure house, Paul was shocked and angry, and the uneasiness in his heart had reached the limit. They actually passed. They have passed the third level. He saw the process of Wang Lu passing the level with his administrator authority. At first, he still held a glimmer of hope that Wang Lu would be defeated in front of the military god Tanu. After all, that was a really powerful opponent. If it weren't for Faceless, his road of trial would have ended here. And after Faceless, Tanu modified the rules and became even more difficult to defeat. With Paul's knowledge, he couldn't even think of a way to defeat him. However, as Wang Lu broke through the difficulties again and again with miraculous means, Paul's heart gradually sank. Especially when Wang Lu took out the counterfeit gold medal and forced the Golden Guardians to kneel down, Paul was even more enraged and cursed. Unfortunately, everything was useless. Wang Lu and the others had already walked on the brilliant staircase and would soon reach the fourth level. And when Paul was full of irritation and even faintly frightened, a gentle and friendly voice said with a smile, "Rest assured, their footsteps stop here. In the fourth level we will end everything." Unfortunately, Faceless One's comfort could not warm people's hearts. And just at this time, a cold voice questioned. End everything? Just by relying on you waste? The one who questioned was a warrior in a blood-colored heavy armor. The warrior's hands were leaning on a serrated great sword, and his whole body was covered with a gloomy and chilling smell of blood. He was the Supreme Inquisitor of Holy Light Religion, the one with the highest number of purified people in the church, Duke Ferdinand. When Wang Lu and the others spent most of the day on the third level, the Supreme Inquisitor finally left them behind and returned to the Holy City alone as fast as he could. At this time, although he was extremely tired, his fighting spirit was still high. Especially when he witnessed Wang Lu break through the third level, which seriously threatened the position of Holy Light Religion in the king's treasure house. He was filled with anger from the bottom of his heart. Heretics who dare to covet my church's holy place must be purified with the most severe punishment. Among the church's 5 legendary saints, the most devout and the most powerful one was undoubtedly the Pope, followed by the Supreme Inquisitor. His fanaticism for the church was almost distorted. 50 years ago, because his daughter fell in love with a heretic, he personally cut off his daughter's head and hung it at the front door of the Inquisitor. As for that heretic, no one knew his whereabouts, and no one wanted to know. With such a deformed and strong belief, Ferdinand naturally loathed the mediocre and incompetent Paul. He always thought that Paul would slow down the church's pace of development, so it was best to cut him down and replace him with a smarter person. Unfortunately, he never got what he wanted. As for Faceless One, a few years ago, he was very optimistic about this ruthless church's sharp knife. Although he didn't have much contact with him, Faceless One's brilliant record made him quite commendable. Unfortunately, after seeing him this time, Ferdinand's heart ignited with anger. Faceless One, do you want to join the fight in this shameful posture? In the eyes of the Supreme Inquisitor, Faceless One's weakness could not be hidden. Not long ago, he was seriously injured by the Night King's sword strike, and now he has not fully recovered. This seriously injured avatar was not even as good as a beginner profession. Participating in the fight would only drag the others down. However, in response to this, Faceless One just glanced at Ferdinand, completely unfazed by this holy one who was above him. He lightly said, "It's none of your business. Who do you think you are? Did I invite you? Did I invite you to express your opinion?" Ferdinand flew into a rage. His serrated greatsword emitted a red light. He couldn't help but want to make his move. If you want to make your move, then go ahead. Kill my avatar, and then use your poor brain to think of tactics to intercept the 9 regions people. If you succeed, all the credit will be yours. The Sea of Holy Light will certainly favor you. I wish you good luck. Faceless One's tone was sarcastic. He simply didn't put Ferdinand in his eyes. Chapter 335. If you want to kill me, just do it. Good luck. Humph. In the face of Faceless One's ridicule, Ferdinand angrily snorted and then suppressed his anger with great patience. Although he had never personally experienced the 4th trial of the champion, he knew the general outline. In that trial, the fighting ability was not important. What was important was the ability to deal with all kinds of emergencies, as well as the ability to flexibly use the rules to attack the opponent. In this regard, Wang Lu's performance in the first 3 trials was enough to frighten people. The only one who could compete with Wang Lu in this regard was Faceless One. Therefore, he must restrain himself. Faceless One, what are your odds of winning against that Wang Lu? Faceless One completely didn't know how to appreciate kindness. He sneered and said, "Ridiculous question, if I say I have no 10%, will you give up? If I say I have 100%, will you believe me? Don't be so shameless." Just as the situation became more and more rigid, a gentle voice suddenly came in. "Faceless, I also want to know this question. Is it convenient for you to explain it to me?" Hearing this voice, even Faceless One was surprised. The Pope? On the other hand, Paul and Ferdinand bowed at the first instant, not daring to delay at all. Although they were all legendary figures, the Pope, as the #1 person in Holy Light religion, was also likely the existence closest to the God realm in the entire Western continent. Thus, his status was far higher than other legendary figures. "No need to be so polite. I'm just an avatar projection. I came here to understand the situation. Faceless, what card do you have in your hand?" Paul and Ferdinand both looked at Faceless One. Since the Pope personally asked, presumably he would not dare to conceal it. However, Faceless One still shook his head. "I can't say it, because it would be meaningless." "Impudent!" Ferdinand angrily shouted. In the doctrine of Holy Light religion, the Pope was the personification of the Sea of Holy Light. Being disrespectful to the Pope could be described as the greatest blasphemy. The Pope himself was exceptionally magnanimous. "No harm, since you don't want to say it, then forget it." However, this time's action. Faceless One disdainfully said, "Do you think I need you to remind me? If I was like these 2 idiots who needed reminders for everything, I wouldn't be alive today." Ha ha ha. Regarding Faceless One's impudence, the Pope unexpectedly laughed in relief. "Good, very good. I can finally leave this place to you without any worries." Faceless One waved his hand. "Get the hell out of here. You shouldn't be so relaxed that you have the leisure to come here to show off, right?" The Pope nodded, and the avatar projection gradually dissipated. Beside Faceless One, the administrator of the King's treasure house and the Supreme Inquisitor were stunned. In this world, there was actually someone who dared to speak to the Pope like that? As the leader of Holy Light religion, the Pope paid great attention to maintaining the dignity of himself and the Church. Anyone who dared to speak disrespectfully in front of him would be severely and justly punished. Even the high-ranking Archbishop of the Church was no exception. They had once seen with their own eyes a cardinal who was a powerful figure in a region. In front of the Pope's scepter, that cardinal vanished in a puff of smoke. Just because, when he met the Pope, he intentionally used the wrong honorific to test and challenge the authority of the Pope. The Pope's strictness was absolute. The only exception was this scene before them. This was the first time they saw the Pope indulging a person to such an extent that they couldn't help but wonder, what was the relationship between this mysterious Faceless One and the Pope? Could it be? Faceless One lightly said, "I am the Pope." "What? That's impossible." "Humph, two idiots." Faceless One coldly snorted. "Enough. Get ready to enter the trial passage. The fourth level is about to begin." Phew, this time the stairs are so long. Standing on the long stairs leading to the fourth level, Wang Lu stopped and somewhat wearily sighed. "Let's take a break here." With that, he directly sat cross-legged on the ground and divided part of his mind to meditate and restore his magical power. Aya and the others looked at him with a slightly strange look. Was Wang Lu tired? He was indeed tired. Although in the eyes of outsiders, Wang Lu's first 3 levels were simply an understatement, like a hot knife through butter, but as the person involved, Wang Lu did not look as relaxed as it seemed. The first 3 levels were indeed very fast, but each level was like walking on a tightrope. A little bit of carelessness and he would fall into a bottomless abyss. For example, in the first level, the fake wine cup, the guardian of the stone gate, relying on his obsession, increased his strength for thousands of years and was already close to the legendary level. With a roar, he could sweep away all the clouds in the sky within a radius of 100 miles. If a fight really broke out, how long could the Night King, who was not even as good as the Salted Egg Superman, resist? In the second level, the labyrinth, Wang Lu crushed all the way with his original magical ability, digging through the walls and digging through the ground in an inhumane straight line. However, how could the danger of defending the space barrier of the king's treasure house be ordinary? A little bit of carelessness would cause the suppression of the entire treasure house, and Wang Lu's mere shoot-on level magical ability would immediately collapse. As for the third level, using the fake gold medal to deter the Golden Guardians, it was also a risky move. If Tanu's control over the army exceeded his expectation, he would immediately make a fool of himself. Perhaps he could persist for a while with his non-phase sword's heaven-defying defense, but his tower defense strategy would completely collapse. Without the defense tower, in the face of hundreds of tireless Golden Guardians, Wang Lu would not be able to persist until the end. In every level, he almost risked his life. Moreover, every time, he personally stood on the front line. Although it seemed easy, the pressure was real. Even if Wang Lu's psychological quality was good, it was inevitable that he would be somewhat tired. "Senior brother, are you tired?" Lu Li cautiously asked. Wang Lu touched her head and said with a smile, "Tired? What a joke. I can fight you for 300 rounds at any time. Lu Li, you don't have to worry about me, you just have to be obedient and take care of yourself, understand?" Lu Li nodded. "I know, Master said the same thing before we went down the mountain." Be good, when we get back, I'll treat you to a big meal." According to the usual practice, the dialogue between the brothers and sisters should end here. However, this time, Lu Li hesitated for a moment and then suddenly asked, "Senior brother, can you assign me more tasks? I have become stronger than before." Wang Lu gawked for a moment. He didn't expect Lu Li to say such a thing. After thinking for a moment, Wang Lu looked at her from head to toe and then nodded in praise. "I haven't paid attention to you for a while, but you're indeed a bit bigger, in sharp contrast to a certain person who couldn't grow for more than 100 years. Aya closed her eyes. "Is that person in sharp contrast referring to me?" Wang Lu comforted her. "Don't mind it, you're also of rare value." Then he turned around and said to Lu Li, "This doesn't seem like a request that you would make. Lu Li, did you experience something some time ago?" Lu Li thought for a moment. "I found a dessert shop in Dragon City." Around them, Aya and Bai Shixian couldn't help but smile. If it were someone else, this kind of unclear thinking pattern would certainly give them a headache. However, when it came to Lu Li, they couldn't find it annoying. And according to Wang Lu's theory, the reason for this was very simple. Because Lu Li was too beautiful. In addition to the dessert shop, there's also a barbecue game that's also very good. It's just opposite the dessert shop. In addition, Lu Li's eyes shone as she recollected her memories. Wang Lu frowned. "Wait a minute. I asked the wrong question. How about this? You write down the recipes for the past month for me, in chronological order from the back to the front. Don't forget to write down the water you drink." Lu Li let out an "oh" sound and didn't ask why. She just honestly wrote it down. As a sword cultivator, her fingers and wrist were extremely nimble. In a twinkling of an eye, she had filled several sheets of paper and finally finished writing down the recipes for the first morning. Aya couldn't help but shake her head and then curiously asked, "What's wrong? Why are you so serious?" During this period of time, Lu Li's progress is indeed great. Soon, she can try the king pill, so it's normal for her to be proactive. Wang Lu said, "Don't think that I'm making a fuss about nothing. Lu Li's brilliant sword heart has been cultivated to this day. Her whole person is pure and spotless, the same inside and out. However, on the other hand, even a trace of dust would be particularly conspicuous. With her character, she goes with the flow and doesn't care about the outside world. In addition to food and immortal cultivation, have you ever seen her take the initiative to ask for anything? Especially after she came to the Western continent, she was entrusted by the elders on the mountain to listen to my instructions in everything. Therefore, she never takes the initiative to ask for anything. It's really hard to imagine that she would say those words for no reason." So that's how it is. Aya looked at Wang Lu's serious expression and inwardly sighed. Wang Lu really doted on Lu Li. Moreover, he took good care of her. However, a girl like Lu Li would, of course, be likable. Therefore, it was natural for Wang Lu to like her. Before long, Lu Li had written a thick stack of paper from memory. 1 month's recipes were all listed on it. Not even a cup of water was left out. Wang Lu picked up the recipe and carefully reviewed it. His reading speed was very fast. In just a cup of tea time, he had finished reading hundreds of pages of paper. He closed his eyes and sorted out his thoughts for a moment. Then, he opened one of the pages, pointed to a line of words and asked, "Lu Li, on this day, which is the day when we just won the Blood Holy Knights in Dragon City, I gave you a holiday to eat and drink in the commercial district. But, what's with this drink?" Aya leaned over to take a look and saw that Lu Li's diet record was very detailed. In addition to what she ate and drank, even the time she used to eat was clearly written. This memory was really admirable. And at the place where Wang Lu pointed, it was written, "A cup of cold drink from a kind-hearted person. X hour X minute to X hour X minute." What's wrong with this paragraph? Wang Lu said, "There are 2 problems. First, I told her that the food given by strangers must not be eaten or even touched easily. I don't think Lu Li would disobey my order for no reason. Second, it took too long. How could it take so long to drink a cup of drink?" Aya laughed in spite of herself. Of course, a drink needs to be tasted slowly, not drunk. Wang Lu coldly said, "What kind of person do you think Lu Li is? It's not like you haven't seen her eat." Chapter 336. For Wang Lu's rebuttal, Aya was suddenly speechless. Lu Li's table manners were not ugly. Obviously, when she was a child, she was carefully corrected by her master. Every movement seemed quiet and elegant, as long as the speed was slowed down by 100 times. Moreover, although Lu Li had a good appreciation for food, she was actually not picky. Except for the extremely difficult to swallow, Aya automatically excluded the dishes that she cooked. No matter what, she would eat it with relish. Her eating speed had always been jaw-dropping. Although the 2 problems pointed out by Wang Lu were slightly far-fetched, they were indeed doubtful points. Lu Li, what happened at that time? Lu Li was very calm. Although the kind-hearted magician told her not to mention it to her senior brother, since her senior brother asked, she, of course, would not hide it. Therefore, each of them played 2 roles, retelling the dialogue at that time word for word. Even the tone of the magician was imitated vividly. After listening to this conversation, anyone could tell that there was a problem. Is this a psychological attack? Wang Lu sneered. Obviously, if you want to target me, the best way is to target Lu Li. And if you want to target Lu Li, general psychological attack will not be effective. Although Lu Li was natural, she was not an idiot. Moreover, after many years of training by her master Zhou Ming, as well as long-term training by Wang Lu, she had a very strong resistance to general psychological attack. It was almost impossible to trigger her negative emotions, to make her feel guilty, to make her waver, to make her confused. She didn't have those negative emotions at all. But what if it's from the front? Using sacrifice, dedication, and winning the love of others to induce her thinking. After all, she is not invulnerable. Brilliant sword heart. Once something happens to Lioli, it will be a fatal blow to me. Fatal blow? Aya looked at Wang Lu with a bit of surprise. Does he mean to say that he has already? Wang Lu said, for me, I can accept anyone else in the team if something happens to them. Except for Lu Li. She must not have an accident. If something happens to the others, the most I can do is take responsibility as the leader. At worst, I can just say that I made a mistake in using people. Because none of you are children, you all have the ability to stand on your own and know how to take care of yourselves. However, Lu Li was different. In this strange continent, there was no way for her to survive alone. This was different from the experiential learning of the Lingjian school disciples. According to Uncle Zhou Ming's original intention, he was opposed to Lu Li coming to the Western continent before the completion of the King Pill. It was my strong advocacy that persuaded Uncle Zhou Ming to agree. During this period, Lu Li was entrusted by her uncle to trust me unreservedly. She would not violate anything, nor would she overstep anything, fearing that something would go wrong. Therefore, by the same logic, I have to bear the responsibility of taking care of her safety. After listening to Wang Lu's explanation, Aya was quite touched. Responsibility was one of the many virtues that Aya valued the most. More than 100 years ago, when her country was torn apart and she herself suffered heavy losses, it was her sense of responsibility for Bretonia that drove her to continue to walk on as a spirit of the brave departed until today. And the people that she most appreciated were precisely those who had a strong sense of responsibility. After Wang Lu finished his explanation, he said to Lu Li, forget that person's words, don't remember a single word. Lu Li gawked for a moment, but she still didn't ask anything and just nodded. I understand, I will forget it. Good girl. Wang Lu touched the girl's head. Now that you've rested enough, let's continue our journey. Before long, the group of people came to the end of the stairs. The situation was very similar to the previous 3 levels. Behind the stairs was a small square, and a gray stone gate blocked the way. However, unlike the previous levels, the surface of the stone gate and the rock walls on both sides were engraved with a large number of murals. When Wang Lu and the others approached, a wave-like ripple appeared on the stone door, which then formed a vague human face and said in a very stiff and rigid voice, "Welcome to the brave challengers. This time, you are not facing the guardian of the Golden King, but a challenger like you. They have the same powerful strength as you, and the same cunning wisdom. It's very difficult, but if you want to be the champion of the Golden King, you must prove that your strength is stronger than your competitors." Wang Lu asked, "How do you prove it?" "Go to the top of beautiful unique Pool Peak and pick up the Sun God Stone. Then you can prove your qualification." Beautiful unique Pool Peak? Sun God Stone? Listening to these 2 completely unfamiliar terms, Wang Lu couldn't help but feel strange. He then looked back at Aya. As a scholar of the Western continent, if there was something strange in this land, it would not be wrong to ask her. Aya recalled for a moment. The era of the Golden King has passed for too long. During this period, there have been many changes in the continent. There are many changes in the terrain, and there are also many places with completely different names. The name Beautiful Unique Pool Peak. I have an impression of 4 or 5 places. However, if I'm not mistaken, the most famous one is located in the Savage Land that is even more distant than the Icethorns Plateau. There are countless miracles and mysteries there. However, even I know very little about the specific story. The Stone Gate said with a sinking voice, "If you want to know about Beautiful Unique Pool Peak and the Sun God Stone, then carefully look at the murals here, which record everything." With that, the Stone Gate burst out a ray of light, which lit up all the murals on both sides of the rock wall and the surface of the Stone Gate. Thousands of murals, as if they were alive, rotated to form a moving image in front of Wang Lu. At the same time, the Stone Gate issued a dull sound as a narration. "TSK. Is this the original version of a documentary?" The murals told a story that happened tens of thousands of years ago. At that time, the Golden King had not yet completely ruled the continent, and the Golden Kingdom was surrounded by countless enemies. Golden King raised his army and went on an expedition in all directions. His army was invincible, but it also experienced a lot of bitter battles. One of the battles could be described as the one that determined the fate of the Golden King. After winning 13 battles in a row, he was about to lead his exhausted army back to the capital. However, in the rear of the Golden Kingdom, his former allies suddenly turned against him. Taking advantage of the fact that Golden King was on an expedition, he launched a surprise attack. Thousands of troops and horses went straight to the capital, which put the Golden Kingdom in a precarious situation. At the time of crisis, Golden King resolutely made a decision. He abandoned his army and single-handedly returned to the capital. As one of the strongest people on the continent at that time, it was much faster to act alone than to lead an army, although it was also much more dangerous. At that time, many people thought that Golden King was crazy and actually courted his own death, but later it turned out that it was his bravest and wisest decision. He acted alone and rushed back to the capital one step ahead of the enemy. Relying on his years of prestige, he quickly formed an army and launched a desperate fight against the enemy. In the attack and defense of the capital, he personally went out and killed the enemy's leader, which established the victory. Then his army marched straight in, wiped out the ally who betrayed him, and burned his country in a raging flame. However, Golden King was not satisfied, because the man who personally ordered the attack on his country did not die, but led his personal guards to flee to the wilderness. The wasteland was a dead end, but he would rather die than fall into the hands of Golden King. However, Golden King was not willing to let him go. He would rather take the same risk to go deep into the wasteland and catch his enemy. It was a pursuit war with death. The two sides scrambled to go deep into the land of death. The deeper they went into the wilderness, the more dangerous the environment was, because it was an absolutely unknown place that no one had ever explored before. The enemy of Golden King was one of the most skilled escapees in the continent. No one knew how long Golden King chased him before he finally caught him and punished him with the cruelest means. The murals used hundreds of pages to describe the cruel means of Golden King in detail. Obviously, it was also the proudest work of Golden King in his life. Previously, when Golden King turned the tide and led his army to defeat the enemy, he only used 2 or 3 paintings to describe it. But the story did not end there, because when the enemy was tortured and on the verge of death, he made a bold move. The Grey Guardian of the Stone Gate tried to imitate the tone of the enemy with a dull and rigid voice. "Gil, do you think you have conquered everything? Do you think your power can cover the whole continent? Open your eyes and see. Look around us, look at the endless distance, look at the mountain that runs through the sky. Before that, we never even knew that there was such a vast space in the continent. This is a strange and mysterious land, and you, as a small, lowly mortal, can never conquer it all. This continent is far more vast than you think, and you are far from being as supreme as you think you are." For the enemy's provocation, Golden King gave the highest profile response. "Ridiculous bastard! How dare you question my authority? This land, no matter how vast it is just my back garden. If there is any strange corner in my back garden, I will conquer it. Gil, you are always so brilliant, always so confident, as if everything in the world is under your control. Unfortunately, this is just an illusion. You are just a mortal. Compared with this world, your lifespan, everything about you is insignificant. You can't conquer everything. Gil, how about this? If you can really conquer that mountain, I will tell you the reason why I betrayed you. I don't care about the bastard's excuse." With that, Golden King crushed his head and then turned his eyes to the mountain hidden in the clouds. "But nothing in this world can be separated from my rule. The mountain hidden in the sea of clouds. You will become my possession." At the end of the story, it described how Golden King went through untold hardships to cross the sea of clouds and climb to the peak. Golden King finally picked a magical gem at the top of the mountain. The power of the gem made him immortal and completely established his 1,000-year achievement. And that mountain was regarded by Golden King as a symbol of his omnipotence, named after the word beautiful unique Pool Peak, which symbolized the supreme in the ancient language. Challengers, follow in the footsteps of the king, climb the beautiful unique Pool Peak, and pick the Sun God Stone. Of course, all of this must be done before your challengers. With that, the image of the mural disappeared completely, and the stone gate became silent. Chapter 337. When the stone gate finished the mural demonstration, the group fell into a long silence. It was indeed an interesting story, but the point was obviously not that story. Among the more than 1,000 murals, Golden King used 99% of them to describe how he turned the tide and established his extraordinary feats, which fully showed his love of luxury and show-off. However, among those murals, only a few of them were really related to the road to the champion's trial. Moreover, Most of them were used to show the wisdom and bravery of the king. As for how Golden King broke through the sea of clouds and climbed to the peak, there was no mention of it. The available information was almost zero. It seems like we can only rely on ourselves. After thinking for a while, Wang Lu came to this conclusion. These murals are really interesting. Rather than saying that Golden King is taking the opportunity to show off, I think it's more like he is deliberately concealing his adventure. It seems that there's something unbearable in the sea of clouds. But then again, climbing the beautiful unique pool peak and picking the sun god stone. Is it the real beautiful unique pool peak? Or is it just a replica of Golden King, similar to the rockery and potted plants in the back garden? Moreover, why would he deliberately design such a trial? It's really thought-provoking. Aya worriedly said, compared to the intention of Golden King, I'm more worried about the challenger mentioned by the stone gate. If I'm not mistaken, it should be the administrator of Holy Light Religion, right? In this trial, he will personally compete with us, but this kind of competition is very disadvantageous to us, because the information between the two sides is completely asymmetric. He has completed this trial a long time ago, so now he's very familiar with it. However, we have to start from scratch, and we have no idea what kind of difficulties we will encounter. Wang Lu said, that's normal. The other side is the defending champion, so it's inevitable that there will be preferential treatment. But isn't this a common thing? Whether it's you or me, we all have the experience of leapfrog challenge. The opponent we met has a longer cultivation time than us, a higher stage than us, and even more complete equipment. No matter from which aspect, it's an unfair fight, but we still won all the way until now. So what does it matter if it's fair or not? That's right, it's just... Aya laughed in spite of herself. I can't believe it's you who encourages me. Wang Lu laughed. I'm your gigolo. At the same time, in front of another stone door, several people in holy robes had just finished looking at the murals. Really, we have already seen it once, but he still forced us to see it again. Golden King's habit of showing off has not changed even after his death. Standing at the head of the team, Paul sighed. The corner of his mouth slightly curled up, showing a somewhat relaxed look. And behind him, in addition to Faceless One and Supreme Inquisitor Ferdinand, there were 5 other Archbishop-level priests. They were the Pope's personal guards. Under the Pope's instruction, they joined as assistants in this operation to ensure that the operation would be foolproof. The addition of these people greatly boosted Paul's confidence. After all, no matter what, the opponents were just a few young people whose real strength was barely comparable to a high-order intermediate profession. As for the Night King's heroic spirit, if she still had her peak strength, she might be very difficult to deal with, but now she was no longer a threat. In terms of strength, Holy Light Religion occupied an absolute advantage. The reason why those blasphemers were able to smoothly pass the first 3 levels was not because of their strength, but because in the face of the rigid checkpoints, they were able to devise tricks. However, in the 4th level, the opponent became a living person, so everything became a pure competition of strength. There was no possibility of using tricks. Moreover, the strength advantage was only one of them. In fact, in the 4th level, strength was not the key to victory. What really made Paul feel that the victory was in his grasp was the advantage in experience. After going in, everyone pay attention to my footsteps. Before arriving at beautiful unique Pool Peak, there is a chaotic sea of clouds, which is a space with chaotic laws. You will often encounter a unique law suppression. For example, some places prohibit the existence of fire elements, so no one can light a fire. Some places prohibit the trial participants from speaking, and violators will die without a doubt. And these laws cannot be broken by brute force, so you can only seriously abide by them. In the past, even with the power of Golden King, he had to follow the rules step by step. During this period, he lost his way several times and was in a sorry state. Therefore, that experience was not recorded on the murals. And the last time, we were able to smoothly pass it, which was somewhat due to luck. Paul did not mention the role of Faceless One and instead encouraged the team's morale. But this time, we are already familiar with the road. Even after more than 80 years, I still remember every step of this level. From stepping into the sea of clouds to arriving at beautiful unique Pool Peak, I am confident that I will not make the slightest mistake. Therefore, you can rest assured to follow me and listen to my orders. Although it is not the real Sun God Stone, it is an imitation made by Golden King to commemorate his great achievements, and its value is not below that of a sacred tool. Therefore, perhaps we should thank those blasphemers. Without them, I have no way to restart this level. Paul said, laughed, and then took the lead to walk through the stone door. However, at this time, they heard Faceless One, who stood at the end of the team, sarcastically said, "It sounds like you already have the victory in your hands?" Ridiculous. The characteristic of idiots is that they are habitually brainless optimistic. I'm really looking forward to seeing you hysterically shout, "This is impossible." Paul turned his head and angrily said, "Faceless, if you're afraid, you can shut up and stay outside the door." Afraid? Faceless One frivolously said with a smile, "I'm indeed afraid. I'm afraid that when the time comes, you will cry endlessly, kneel down and beg me for help, and conveniently rub your snot on my shoes." Paul was ashamed and angry at the same time. Enough. Don't think that just because you had some performance in the champions trial that you can look down on everyone. It was thanks to your help that I cleared the trial last time, but I've already memorized all the steps to clear the trial. It doesn't matter whether I have you or not. In this level, you don't have any qualification to tell me what to do. Oh, what an unyielding and messy speech. It's simply touching. Faceless One sarcastically smiled and then reached out his hand. Then let's wait and see. Yes, let's wait and see. You will definitely pay for your arrogance and rudeness. In resentment, Paul led the team into the stone door. Everyone felt that the scenery in front of them changed. A vast sea of clouds appeared in front of them, and on the other side of the sea of clouds was a towering mountain that pierced the sky. Beautiful, unique Pool Peak, the symbol of the authority of the Golden King, was everywhere. They stood on a floating island, surrounded by the vast sea of clouds. Once they stepped out of the island, it meant that they had officially set foot on the road to the mountain, and they had to face the murderous intent of the chaotic sea of clouds. According to Paul's memory, the best way to start should be to take the first step in a rock crevice, and a rock crevice? Huh? With a hint of surprise, Paul began to carefully observe the surrounding scenery. However, a moment later, his heart was frightened and he subconsciously took a few steps back. Here, what is this place? Compared with the narrow but familiar island in his memory, the land under his feet, although also narrow and depressing, had almost no other characteristics. Even the color of the land was completely different. And when he looked again, the angle of the distant, beautiful, unique Pool Peak was also completely different from his memory. In other words, the starting point is different from the last time. This. Paul stared with wide eyes, sweating profusely. His dry lips opened and closed, but he couldn't spit out a word. What is this? Is this impossible? An idiot is an idiot. Faceless One's voice seemed so harsh at this time. I've always wondered, where did you get the confidence to think that everything will be exactly the same as the last time? Even if you are as stupid as a pig or a dog, you should know that the two trials can't have the same process. Even if we don't consider the unpredictable nature of the chaotic sea of clouds, last time there was only one group of challengers, but this time there are two groups. The focus of the entire trial has changed. And you actually think that everything will be exactly the same as the last time. Listening to Faceless One's ridicule, Paul felt blood rushing to his face, but he couldn't say a word. Faceless One, continuing to laugh at Paul will not help our action. The Supreme Inquisitor Ferdinand interrupted Faceless One with a sinking voice. You will lead the team to do what you want to do. Paul was startled. Ferdinand, you... Enough, idiot. Don't you think your appearance is ugly enough? I didn't come here to see how you make a fool of yourself. Hurry up and end this trial and purify the blasphemer. Faceless One laughed. Ha ha ha, no wonder those Easterners often say that fresh flowers need green leaves to set them off. Compared with that idiot Paul, you, this idiot, actually look a bit more pleasing to the eye. With that, Faceless One took the lead and his figure directly submerged into the clouds. However, before he could take 2 steps, a cry of alarm suddenly came from the clouds. Come here, quickly. Upon hearing Faceless One's cry, the others were startled. What kind of situation could make this arrogant and lawless guy cry out in alarm? Did he encounter Wang Lu and the others? Without thinking too much, they flew into the sea of clouds. However, just as their bodies were wrapped in the clouds, they felt their whole body sink. The intense holy light that filled their bodies instantly dimmed, as if they were being suppressed by an unknown force. Their strength was reduced to less than 1/10. This is... Paul and Ferdinand were not the only ones who were shocked. The 5 archbishops who had been nurtured by the Pope as death warriors were also horrified. It was because a large part of the power they relied on the most had been destroyed for no apparent reason. Faceless One, what's going on here? Ferdinand's voice seemed a bit weak. This legendary level Holy One, at this time, was actually weakened to the intermediate high order. Moreover, even after exhausting all means, he still couldn't recover it. He had experienced great winds and waves in his life, but this was the first time he encountered such a strange situation. Faceless One laughed, spread out his hands and said, "Paul should have explained to you before that in the sea of clouds, the suppression of the law is everywhere. And now, the suppression that we have to bear is that once we enter, our strength will at most be retained at the intermediate high-order profession level." King Ghost Place. Ferdinand cursed, and then his sharp eyes pierced Faceless One. "You already knew it would be like this?" Faceless One said, "I knew it the first time I stepped into the sea of clouds. Otherwise, why would I tell you to come quickly? If I hadn't lured you here by surprise, after knowing the situation here, you would definitely hesitate outside, and we don't have that much time to waste." "What did you say?" "I mean, if we don't hurry up, we won't have a chance. This sea of clouds with unpredictable law seems to be tailor-made for him." Although Faceless One was stating an urgent fact, his tone was calm. Halfway through, he suddenly turned his head. "Oh, by the way, the nail I buried in that girl's body should have been discovered, right?" Chapter 338. At the same time, at the other end of the chaotic sea of clouds, a team of challengers was quietly walking in the clouds. The crisp impact of their footsteps on the flagstone ground continued to reverberate in the gray haze, as if they were in a closed and depressing hall. "Wang Lu, do you feel that the air here is a bit depressing?" In the silence, Aya suddenly opened her mouth. "A bit depressing?" Wang Lu wrinkled his nose and sniffed. "Do you want to say that in the treasure house of Golden King, this dictatorship ruler, there is a lack of democracy and freedom?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Aya sighed. "What I want to say is, in this place, it seems that the power of the profession is suppressed. Moreover, the suppression comes from the law of origin, and there is simply no way to resist." Wang Lu was surprised. "Is there such a thing? I didn't notice it at all." Non-phase method was not known for its sensitivity, but his void spirit root was the most sensitive physique in the world. Although he had to experience the transformation of the law in the Western continent, it was not to the extent that he didn't know it when he was in a place with the law of suppression. "Is the suppression serious?" Wang Lu asked. "Fortunately, here, it seems that our power level is suppressed to intermediate high order, that is, around Yuanying stage." Aya said, "Fortunately, I'm not in a good state, so I'm not greatly affected." "What about you? Aren't you asking the obvious?" Wang Lu was silent for a moment, and then sighed. "Although I'm not even the king pill, when you said it like that, I have a complex feeling of being a well-known writer being stuffed with a child's ticket. In short, this place doesn't seem to want us to have too strong individual strength, but for a mere intermediate high order to explore the sea of clouds that even Golden King would find tricky, it's really too much." Aya frowned, extremely puzzled. "Moreover, what is the significance of this restriction?" Wang Lu said, "At present, the biggest significance is to play the role of novice protection, because this restriction is very advantageous for a weak team like us, but absolutely disadvantageous for Holy Light religion. In order to deal with us, they must have gathered their most powerful team. I'm afraid they even have more than one legendary rank. Unfortunately, all of them are now wasted." Aya asked, "Do you think someone did this on purpose? For example?" Wang Lu hesitated and said, "From the result, it does seem that Golden King is deliberately taking care of us. After all, if we win, it will be more beneficial to him." However, it was hard to imagine that this kind of thinking pattern would be the thinking pattern of Golden King. With his character, perhaps he would disdain to play this kind of small trick to suppress one side and elevate the other side. If we want to win the championship and seize the administrator's position, we must use our own strength to prove our qualifications within the established framework. Moreover, in my impression, although Golden King is cruel and heartless, he has never been regarded as nepotism. He doesn't even recognize his own family." Aya sighed. "That's true. I don't think someone as proud as the Golden King would use such a cheap trick. Forget it. I'll think about things I can't figure out later. This is a long journey, and the truth will eventually be revealed. While the two were talking softly, Bai Shishwan's voice suddenly came from the front. Senior brother, Aya, please come and take a look. Wang Lu and Aya looked at each other and then quickly walked to the front of the team. They saw Bai Shishwan standing there with a puzzled look. Beside her, as the pathfinder, Quan Zuhua, uneasily shook his fur, looked straight ahead, and made a gurgling sound from his throat. And in front of them, in the thick haze, there was a vague shadow of a huge castle. This is a castle? Aya was surprised. How could there be a castle here? Beautiful unique Pool Peak is located at the edge of the wasteland, a place where no human has lived for tens of thousands of years in the western continent. How could there be such a mock of human civilization? Is it the legacy of Golden King? In the process of crossing the Sea of Clouds, did he build a castle as a palace? Aya's speculation was in line with Golden King's extravagant temperament, but this speculation was quickly denied by her. No, although this castle is huge, its style is too simple. If it was Golden King, he would not build it so crudely. Either he didn't build it, or he built it to be dazzling. Moreover, this castle always gives people an unfathomable feeling. Its history seems to be very long, longer than any era that we know. Aya said, and her attention was gradually attracted by the castle. Hidden in the haze, the castle was like an observer that had experienced the vicissitudes of life for hundreds of millions of years, indifferently watching everything around it. Its cold figure made people shudder, but it also contained an irresistible mysterious charm. Bai Shishwan asked, Senior brother, do you want to go and take a look? Of course, we can't just turn a blind eye to it. After walking for so long, this castle is the only clue. Previously, when the group of people entered the fourth level through the stone gate, they were immediately swallowed by the thick clouds and instantly lost all their vision. Not to mention the once clearly distinguishable beautiful unique Pool Peak that stood on the other side of the Sea of Clouds. Wang Lu looked down and couldn't even see his own feet. This isolation of perception not only came from the physical level, but also from the chaotic Sea of Clouds, which contained a very special force that severely limited the perception of the challengers. Without perception, there was no other reference in the Sea of Clouds, plus the disordered space here, so it was impossible to locate them. In Wang Lu's view, this was like an invisible barrier that bound them to only go to the designated place. Therefore, when the castle appeared, Wang Lu immediately made a judgment that they must enter the castle. Because if they missed such an obvious clue, they would likely be lost in the Sea of Clouds forever. After Wang Lu led the crowd to the castle gate slowly opened, revealing a faint light, as if the castle was coldly welcoming them. Following the direction of the light, the group of people cautiously entered the castle. When Aya, who was at the back, also stepped through the door, the heavy and huge castle door suddenly closed, and then disappeared into the thick fog that suddenly appeared. Aya very vigilantly turned around and swung her sword. The more than 3 feet long stone sword swept backward, but it only hit empty air. The sharp sword chi tore through the clouds, creating a hundreds of meters long tumble, but there was no trace of the castle gate. The gate is gone. Wang Lu was not surprised. It means to let us move forward and not look back. Okay, then let's see what is in this castle. After an hour. Senior brother, we've also explored the second floor. The structure is similar to the first floor. It's a winding corridor with 10 rooms on each side. Each room leads to a different plane, and each of them contains very rich resources. Bai Shishwan reported in a soft voice. She was also holding a few crystal stones that could record images and sounds. This is the video recording of me and Lu Li when we explored separately. Please review it, senior brother. Wang Lu waved his hand. No need to look at it. Since the structure is similar to the first floor, I'm afraid the content is also similar. There are a total of 80 rooms on the 2 floors, leading to 80 different places. Each independent plane is rich in 1 or 2 kinds of resources. This castle is like a warehouse, a transit station. It allows us to make sufficient preparations before embarking on the real journey. As Wang Lu said this, he looked at the tightly closed gate not far away. His brows gradually wrinkled, and his eyes turned sharp. Get ready to break through the fog blockade outside the door. Behind the door was an absolute blockade of fog. It was not difficult to open the door. Although it was thick and solid and could not be destroyed by brute force, as long as the right position was used, it could be pushed open. But after pushing open the door, it was so thick that one couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. Stepping inside was like walking into a different dimensional space. No matter how hard they tried to move forward, they couldn't get more than 3 feet away from the door. Wang Lu let everyone in the team try it. After walking out of the door, it was like being possessed. No matter how hard they struggled, they couldn't move forward. The law of space seemed to be imprisoned. In addition to this door, there were 80 rooms inside the castle. Although each led to a different area, each of them was a dead end, which was not the direction they should go. Therefore, the situation temporarily fell into a deadlock. Sort out your thoughts, Wang Lu. After finishing the exploration of a room on the first floor, Aya returned to the hall on the first floor, exhausted. Now we seemed to be trapped. There were only 2 doors leading to the outside world. One was the entrance, which disappeared into the sea of clouds after Wang Lu and the others entered. The other was the obstacle that they needed to break through. Both seemed to be dead ends. Wang Lu said, according to the current situation, the meaning of this level should be that we need to find something in these 80 rooms before we can move forward. I have just found something similar to sesame in the room of crops, but it seems to be completely useless. Aya completely couldn't understand Wang Lu's obsession with sesame, so she had to say, do you want to take a part of the resources in these 80 rooms and try them one by one? It's the most inefficient and the stupidest method. But if there's no other clue, we can only try it first. As a professional adventurer, Wang Lu always hated the inefficient method. However, if there was no other way, he would not insist on it. After all, even the stupidest method was better than hesitation. However, just as Wang Lu was about to mobilize the crowd to collect resources, Lu Li's cheerful laughter suddenly came from above his head. Ha ha ha, senior brother, I found 2 paintings. 2 paintings? Wang Lu's curiosity was immediately piqued. With a tap of his foot, he flew toward the direction of Lu Li's voice. The clouds and mist were everywhere in the 4th level. Even inside the castle, if they were far away, they would be shrouded by the clouds and mist. Although this castle only had 2 floors, the space of each floor was very wide. Wang Lu flew for hundreds of meters before he saw the ceiling of the first floor and the excited Lu Li. Senior brother, look, there are 2 paintings here. They are really beautiful. Wang Lu looked at the direction of Lu Li's finger, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. Lu Li, you've made a great contribution. Chapter 339. The 2 paintings pointed out by Lu Li were the legacy of Golden King. As for why Wang Lu could be sure, it was because the 2 paintings were made of pure gold. The glittering golden light was enough to blind a dog's eyes. In this world, except for Golden King, probably no one would be obsessed with gold to this extent, even carving a mural out of pure gold. The 2 paintings that Golden King left here were painted on the top of the exit gate. With his character, if he wanted to leave a painting, of course, he would leave it on the top. Because the gate was too high, the top was hidden in the clouds, so no one noticed it before. Only a bored person like Lu Li could find it. Both murals showed quite exquisite painting skills, but what was really worth paying attention to was the content. Both paintings were self-portraits of Golden King. On the left, Golden King personally built a shining golden chariot, and on the right, Golden King cut through the sea of clouds with irresistible force. It was difficult to say whether these 2 murals were clues left by Golden King or simply showing off. In the painting, Golden King himself was radiant. Whether it was waving the forging hammer to build the chariot or driving the chariot forward, his domineering aura was simply overflowing. However, Wang Lu soon discovered the problem with these 2 murals. Why did he build a chariot? Although in the first painting, Golden King focused the composition on how to express his wisdom and martial prowess, the posture of wielding the forging hammer, the focused and detached demeanor, under the exquisite painting was lifelike. However, no matter how wise he was, what he did was only a humble craftsman's work, which was quite inconsistent with his identity. A king should be proud and noble, calmly ordering his servants to do their work. As for personally waving the forging hammer while sweating like rain, it didn't seem to match. What's more, with the strength of Golden King, why would he need a chariot to help him fight? According to legend, the only treasure that was truly worthy of his attention and reliance was his heaven and earth parting sword. The rest of the treasures in the king's treasure house were just collections, which could not help in a real battle. In the second painting, Golden King drove the chariot all the way, and the thorny wheels crushed countless shadow-like enemies, which fully reflected the king's bravery. However, there were many details in the painting that revealed a secret. When the chariot built by Golden King was running, the friction between the outer wall and the clouds produced high-temperature sparks, as if it was desperately resisting the erosion of the clouds. In addition to these two paintings, Golden King did not leave any more clues, but when Wang Lu saw this, he had a general judgment. There must be a reason why Golden King built the chariot. Combined with the second painting, the resistance between the chariot and the clouds, it was not difficult to come to a conclusion. Without the chariot, even Golden King would find it difficult to move in the sea of clouds. This difficulty was not due to a lack of power, but due to the laws. It was no wonder that Golden King didn't carve his experience of crossing the sea of clouds into a mural at the entrance of the 4th level for future generations to admire. Because during this process, there were quite a few situations where he was forced into a corner, and it wasn't worth showing off. However, what was it that could make Golden King bow his head? Judging from the situation of this castle, Golden King was just a passerby. So who was the owner of this castle? And the sea of clouds outside the castle, was it naturally formed, or was it caused by external forces? Thinking about it this way, the secret hidden in this chaotic sea of clouds was really amazing. The level involved was likely to go beyond the level of the human world, reaching the realm of the gods. However, now was not the time to decipher the setting of these stories. The immediate problem was how to break through the blockade of clouds and arrive at beautiful unique Pool Peak before Holy Light Religion. In short, if we want to break through the blockade of clouds and mist, we can't rely on personal strength alone. We must rely on the chariot. When Wang Lu thought of this, his eyes began to look around the castle. Inwardly, he gradually felt eager to give it a try. In other words, the resources in the 80 rooms of the castle are the materials for the chariot prepared by some kind person. With so many choices, what kind of chariot should we build? First of all, there must be 5 pairs of wheels, right? TSK, what a bad luck to actually be assigned to the Blood Demon camp. At the other end of the Sea of Clouds, the group of Holy Light Religion also came to a transit station. It was just that, unlike the serene forest castle where Wang Lu was, they were in a huge tent. Inside the tent, all kinds of materials were piled up like a mountain, mixed together. After seeing this big tent, Paul could not help but complain. Seeing the Supreme Inquisitor's puzzled look, Paul explained to him, in the Sea of Clouds, there are a total of 8 transit stations. They are the resource warehouses built by the 8 powerful people in ancient times in order to break through the blockade of the Sea of Clouds and explore the deeper secrets. The Supreme Inquisitor asked, why do they build the resource warehouses? Because it is necessary to make a suitable means of transportation here to continue to move forward. This Sea of Clouds has a special rule restriction, so it is impossible to move forward on foot. Impossible to move forward on foot? What a strange rule. But, a suitable means of transportation? The Supreme Inquisitor frowned deeper. What is considered suitable? Paul was somewhat embarrassed. About this, Faceless One lightly interjected, if you can reach beautiful unique Pool Peak, then it is suitable. If you can't, then it's not suitable. The rules in the Sea of Clouds are ever-changing. Whether it is suitable or not, you can only know by walking through it yourself. The reason why this storehouse has collected so many resources is to give people countless chances to try again and again. The Supreme Inquisitor was silent for a moment. Then he went straight to the exit of the big tent and stepped into the Sea of Clouds. However, he soon fell into a dead end. No matter where he went, he was just walking in the same place. Paul said, don't try. If we could just rush through it, we wouldn't have wasted so many years exploring here. Unfortunately, at that time we were in the dark crypt, where the resources were 10 times richer than in the Blood Demon tent. Now, it would be difficult to build a level 8 or higher vehicle. Level 8. Paul explained, the vehicles built here, before entering the Sea of Clouds, will get an overall rating according to their quality. Only those with a rating of level 7 or higher can pass through the obstacles and reach the destination, beautiful unique Pool Peak. If the rating is too low, halfway through, it will encounter insurmountable obstacles and disintegrate. After the vehicle disintegrates, what will happen to the people in the vehicle? Faceless One lightly said, rest assured, they will directly return to the starting point. They will not die in the Sea of Clouds. With that, his voice rippled with a hint of sarcasm. However, once you enter the transit station, unless you can reach the beautiful unique Pool Peak, you will never be able to leave. Therefore, being trapped here is no different from being dead. This news was obviously unexpected. The 5 archbishops were slightly shocked. However, the Supreme Inquisitor nodded. Yes, as a faithful servant of the Holy Light, the one who bathes in the Holy Light is my gift. Those who can't complete the task are not qualified to live in this world. Then the Supreme Inquisitor asked Paul, "You have passed the 4th pass, so it shouldn't be difficult to build a vehicle that can pass this pass, right?" Paul said naturally, "It's not difficult. In the last pass, we were lucky enough to imitate the famous glorious extreme speed in the history of the Church. With a rating of level 8, we cut through all the obstacles to reach the destination." Glorious extreme speed? The Supreme Inquisitor sucked in a mouthful of cold air. That is the rumored vehicle of the Holy Light's child in the ancient times, the legendary vehicle that has been destroyed for thousands of years. At present, the only remaining wreckage is preserved in the Cathedral of Origin. Even the most brilliant craftsman is unable to decipher its secret, yet you guys actually imitated it. Paul somewhat awkwardly said, "Of course it's not me." The Supreme Inquisitor froze for a moment. He also realized that expecting Paul, this waste, to imitate glorious extreme speed was like a fantasy. Then, "Faceless, is that you? Can you build another chariot?" Faceless One sneered. "Of course not. The resources in the Blood Demon tent are completely different from the Dark Crypt. The several key materials needed for glorious extreme speed are not here, so how could I make it? Moreover, when I built glorious extreme speed, the materials in the Dark Crypt have already been used up, so it's impossible to build a second vehicle." Upon hearing this, Paul was taken aback. What? Impossible to build a second vehicle? The Supreme Inquisitor was not surprised by this. Then, in addition to glorious extreme speed, can you build another level 8 vehicle? Faceless One said, "Is there any other vehicle in the history of Holy Light religion that can be on the same level as glorious extreme speed?" The Supreme Inquisitor was speechless. In the history of Holy Light religion, there were countless sacred tools, but there was only one vehicle, glorious extreme speed. The quality of other vehicles was much inferior. So what are you going to do? It's very simple. If we can't build it, then we won't build it. Faceless One said, "Why do we have to build a level 7 or 8 vehicle? In fact, even if we are assigned to the Dark Crypt, with complete resources and complete blueprints, we don't need to waste time to modify the blueprints through trial and error. However, if we really want to build a legendary vehicle, it's impossible without a few months of time. But a few months is too long for us. This is a race game, so we don't have a few months to waste." Then, Faceless One said, "Since it's a race game, there are 2 ways to win. The first is to be faster than the other party, and the second is to make the other party slower than you. The topography of the Sea of Clouds is generally like a ring of ripples. The closer you are to the core of beautiful unique Pool Peak, the stronger the resistance. Conversely, the closer you are to the periphery, the easier it is to advance. The 8 transit stations on the periphery of the Sea of Clouds are all on the same periphery ring. Therefore, we only need to use the shortest time to build a vehicle that can barely break through the cloud blockade and can move freely on the periphery. Probably a level 1 or 2 inferior vehicle. And then, with the fastest speed to find the opponent and destroy the opponent, so that they can never reach the destination, which is equal to a sure win." The Supreme Inquisitor Ferdinand asked, "Will the other party honestly wait in the transit station and let you find them?" Faceless One said, "As long as we move fast enough, they won't have enough time to leave. They don't have the experience of passing through the checkpoint." In theory, it would take a certain amount of time to solve the puzzle of needing a vehicle to move forward. As for building a vehicle, it would take even more time. Moreover, even if they can really build a vehicle in just a few days and leave the transit station, I have a way to lock their position in the Sea of Clouds. Ferdinand curiously said, "This Sea of Clouds is isolated from all perception. How are you going to lock them?" Faceless One coldly smiled. "Because the Holy Light will guide me forward." Chapter 340. To sum up, what we have to do now is to build a chariot. After reading the clues left by Golden King, Wang Lu quickly gathered his teammates and shared his judgment. No one would doubt Wang Lu's judgment. Since he dared to assert that the chariot was the key to break through the cloud blockade, then it should not be wrong. And when Aya and the others saw the mural above the gate, They even more agreed with Wang Lu's conclusion. But, can you build a chariot? Aya asked. As far as I know, although you've learned a lot in Spirit Sword Mountain, you haven't had the time to dabble in the chariot refining. Wang Lu said with a smile. I didn't expect you to know my progress so well. You're right, although I've begun to learn the path of tool refining, I haven't even had the time to start on the chariot manufacturing, which is a high-order branch subject. Therefore, it's impossible to build a luxury car like Golden King. After a pause, Wang Lu said, however, I can still build a simple chariot. Simple? According to the description of Golden King's mural, there are dangers everywhere in the Sea of Clouds, and the chariot can be said to be our only shelter. Wouldn't it be too dangerous to build a simple chariot? Aya said, it's better to be safe. Although I haven't systematically studied the manufacturing of a chariot, I've been on the battlefield for a long time, so I have some understanding of it. If the two of us cooperate, we can try to build a powerful chariot. In any case, the resources in this castle are almost infinite, so we can try as much as we want. With your talent, even if you start from scratch, it's still not too late. Wang Lu shook his head and said with a smile, Aya, you think too highly of me. The chariot is broad and profound. In the absence of guidance, if we rely on self-study and exploration, it would take at least 3 to 5 years to build a chariot with 5 pairs of load-bearing wheels. But how can we have 3 to 5 years? With that, Wang Lu's expression gradually became serious. In fact, we probably don't even have 3 to 5 days. This is a race game, and there are 2 conditions for winning. One is to try to be faster than the other, and the other is to try to make the other party slower than you. With our conditions, there is only the first way to go, but for Holy Light Religion, they are likely to choose the second way. As long as they use the fastest speed to build a simple chariot to break into the Sea of Clouds and try to eliminate us, it will be a great success. There is no need to waste time competing with the Sea of Clouds. Aya was startled when she heard this, but her eyes immediately calmed down. I didn't think of this, but if we don't even have 3 to 5 days, what should we do? It's very simple. We have to be faster than them. If they take 3 to 5 days to build a simple war chariot, we will take 6 to 10 hours. 6 to 10 hours. Aya was surprised. Not to mention building a war chariot, even drawing a war chariot would be difficult. Wang Lu said confidently, don't worry, I have a special manufacturing technique. Didn't I say that I can't make complicated ones, but I can make simple ones? Leave the rest to me. Simple. An ominous premonition rose in Aya's heart. Simple war chariot. How simple was it? However, no matter how arrogant Wang Lu was, he wouldn't treat everyone's lives as a joke. Right now, they could only trust him. Half an hour later, Wang Lu successfully built his first war chariot. Ha ha ha, my #1 war chariot is fresh out of the oven. When Wang Lu came out of a room that stored a large amount of metal, his hearty laughter filled every corner of the hall. Aya and the others who stayed behind in the hall were surprised. So fast. Although they already knew that Wang Lu was a person who was good at creating miracles, this time, he still stunned them. In just half an hour, he built a war chariot, which was somewhat beyond their imagination. Senior brother is so awesome. Lu Li clapped her hands in excitement as if she had created a miracle. Where is the war chariot? Lu Li wants to see it. Wang Lu waved his hands sideways, revealing something behind him, and then said with a hearty smile, Look, it's here. Lu Li's eyes widened. After looking at it again and again, she inconceivably pointed at the thing behind Wang Lu and tremblingly asked, Don't tell me that's Senior brother's war chariot? Wang Lu nodded. Yes, this is the everlasting war chariot that I personally forged and decorated after gathering a large amount of gold and mithril. Doesn't it look very mighty and majestic that you can't look straight at it? Can't look straight at it. Is it? It's indeed hard to look straight at it. Aya swallowed with difficulty. Her eyes were also wide open, revealing a look of disbelief. Is that a war chariot? How could there be such a war chariot in this world? It only has 2 wheels. Wang Lu smiled and reached out to stroke his beloved war chariot. After all, it's a simple version. Compared to the big guy with 5 pairs of load-bearing wheels, it's certainly a lot simpler, so it's normal to have fewer wheels. Moreover, are 2-wheeled war chariots rare? Many armies use 2-wheeled war chariots to fight. Aya anxiously said, That's because there's a mount pulling the chariot. Moreover, the two wheels of the two-wheeled war chariot are coaxial. Your two wheels, one in front and one in the back, are connected by a chain. Moreover, looking at the structure, it's clearly human-powered. Wang Lu proudly smiled. Yes, it doesn't need animal power. As long as the pedals are pushed, the chain can drive the wheels to roll forward. It's very convenient and fast. Therefore, this war chariot has another name, bicycle. Are you going to break through the sea of clouds with this meat-wrapped iron thing? Are you crazy? Wang Lu's smile gradually faded. I'm crazy. It's just that your mind can't keep up. The rules here limit that we must take a war chariot to leave the castle and enter the sea of clouds. But there's no rule on what kind of war chariot it is, right? But you're too far-fetched. Such a simple war chariot. What if we encounter danger? Wang Lu picked up his smile again. Encounter danger? Have you forgotten my profession? I'm the strongest meat shield. Compared to meat wrapped in iron is stronger. Aya felt that no matter how reasonable she was when talking to Wang Lu, she would be at a loss for words after 2 or 3 sentences, so she couldn't say much. She changed the topic and asked, but your war chariot only has 1 seat, and we have 5 people here. Wang Lu said, what's so difficult about that? Just stack it up. Stack it up? That's right, later I'll be in charge of driving the war chariot. You'll ride on my neck, then spread your arms and let Lioli and Little White sit on either side. The stupid dog will sit in the basket in front of me. Isn't that enough? Aya imagined the scene in her mind and wanted to vomit blood. Don't even think about making me perform that kind of ugly performance. How is that ugly performance? That's the world's number 3 acrobatic performance. Wang Lu said, but he also knew that it was difficult for Aya to accept the world's number 3 acrobatic performance, so he didn't force her. He pushed the everlasting war chariot and walked out alone. Of course, since this war chariot hasn't been tested in actual combat, I won't force you to fight with me. I'll go out alone to test the performance of the war chariot. At the same time, I'll try to verify my conjecture. Seeing that Wang Lu had made up his mind, although Aya was quite against it in her heart, she didn't say anything. She just silently stood by the door, deciding that if Wang Lu encountered any danger, she would go to his rescue at the first moment. The door to the castle's exit was slowly pushed open, revealing the endless confusion behind the door. Wang Lu elegantly boarded the war chariot and quickly drove behind the door. Aya guarded by the door, her whole body on guard. However, just as Wang Lu's figure disappeared into the sea of clouds, Aya completely lost contact with him. What? Aya was startled. She immediately guessed that there was a special law in the sea of clouds that isolated perception. Wang Lu shouldn't have gone far, but the woman couldn't help but worry. This place was filled with strange rules. When a person was alone, they couldn't leave the castle, but as long as they rode the strange war chariot, they would be unimpeded. The person who built this ancient castle back then must have had a really wicked sense of humor. There shouldn't be any problems for Wang Lu to explore it. It really is a strange place. On the other side, riding his beloved everlasting war chariot, Wang Lu was slowly advancing through the sea of clouds. Although looking out from the castle, the clouds and mist obscured one's vision. However, once one entered the clouds and mist, one would discover that there was actually a different world. The thick clouds and mist were actually just a layer of veil that obstructed one's vision. Once one broke through it, the view behind would suddenly become clear. Wang Lu was traveling through a wide canyon. On both sides were picturesque mountains and rivers, with birds chirping and fragrant flowers. It was a beautiful scenery. The sun hung high above his head, and there weren't any clouds for thousands of miles. Let alone a churning sea of clouds, there wasn't even a single cloud. However, not long after riding along the canyon, the air suddenly became heavy and stagnant, making it difficult to breathe. The binding force from the earth suddenly increased several times, firmly attracting Wang Lu and his war chariot. The wheels made of cork sank deeper into the ground. Wang Lu hesitated for a moment and then decided to continue to move forward. However, as he continued to go deeper, the resistance rapidly increased. Before long, the restraint from the earth had been 100 times stronger than before. It was tantamount to Wang Lu carrying 100 everlasting self-propelled vehicles and 100 strong young men. This was naturally not a burden for Wang Lu, whose physique had already surpassed that of a king pill cultivator. But, for the war chariot beneath him, it was unbearable. With a creaking sound, the wheels of the everlasting war chariot collapsed. At the same time, Wang Lu felt his vision blur, and he reappeared in the gloomy castle. Aya and the others asked with concern, "Senior brother Wang Lu, are you okay?" Wang Lu nodded, signaling everyone to be at ease. He then looked down at the wreckage of the everlasting war chariot that had been distorted by the great gravity, and said with regret, "The everlasting is broken. However, this exploration has accumulated valuable experience, and the sacrifice of the everlasting is valuable. The next step is gradually becoming clear." As Wang Lu spoke, he resolutely walked into the room where the resources were stored and began a new round of forging. Chapter 341. This is your second vehicle, the flying pigeon? Looking at Wang Lu's freshly made second vehicle, Aya felt weak all over. She then made up her mind not to ride it no matter what. According to Wang Lu, the second vehicle was a modified version based on the lessons he learned from the failure of the first vehicle. All aspects of performance had a qualitative leap, and its ability to survive in the sea of clouds was significantly enhanced. However, in Aya's eyes, it was a broken goods with a crooked beam, 2 wheels that were not perfectly round, and the chain was loose. Rather than saying it was a pigeon, it was more like a weak chicken. Roughly speaking, it was just such a vehicle. What happened to you just now?" Aya could not help but sincerely ask with emotion. Wang Lu sighed. The pain of a genius often comes from the prejudice of the secular world. "Aya, I have eaten your soft rice for so many years in the Spirit Sword Mountain cafeteria. I always thought that a person who can make dark cuisine must have the temperament of a performance artist. Unexpectedly, you're also so vulgar." Then, before Aya's anger accumulated to a certain level, Wang Lu explained, "Don't look at this vehicle's ugly appearance. I have a special driving skill." Aya suspiciously asked, "Special driving skill?" Wang Lu nodded, and then took out a tough rope and tied it to the beam of the vehicle. Because it was crooked, the rope just happened to be stuck in a groove, which was particularly strong. Then, Wang Lu exerted force with both of his hands, lifted the entire vehicle and put it on his back. The 2 ends of the rope went around his chest and tied a knot. He actually carried the vehicle on his back like a huge sword. Humph, this way, I don't have to worry about the vehicle collapsing under the 100 times gravity. Aya was dumbfounded. She felt that the bottom line of her imagination had once again been broken. She had been leading the army for many years and had seen all kinds of special driving skills. However, she had never seen anyone driving a vehicle on his back. What kind of vehicle is this? It's more like a piece of luggage. Wang Lu shook his head. This is the prejudice of the secular world. This is just a special driving method, called the old man pulling the vehicle. Go ahead, I don't care about you anymore. Wang Lu then carried his beloved flying pigeon vehicle and once again went deep into the sea of clouds. And this time, his purpose was very clear. Go as deep as possible, break through, and see where the limit of his routine was. Wang Lu didn't think that the old man pulling the carriage could protect him all the way to beautiful unique Pool Peak. However, as a professional adventurer, his strong intuition told him that it was best not to stick to the castle, because that would be suicidal. Therefore, he would rather take the risk of traveling alone through the sea of clouds to find a shortcut. In fact, there was indeed a vague idea in his mind. To put it bluntly, it was a very simple and straightforward idea, but it was a thought that many people ignored. A long time ago, the ancient powers left behind a gloomy ancient castle at the edge of the Cloud Sea. It was used as a platform and warehouse to build war chariots. Although it was not clear why they were so obsessed with war chariots, in short, after they ended their exploration of the Cloud Sea, did they leave anything here? Similarly, tens of thousands of years ago, Golden King built a powerful chariot in the castle and crushed all the way to beautiful unique Pool Peak. Then what happened to that chariot? Was it taken away by him as a souvenir, or? There was no definite answer to these questions, but it didn't prevent Wang Lu from guessing. After all, there was not much loss. According to Wang Lu's guess, the Holy Light religion should not be as straightforward as him. At least, it would take them a few days to build a low-level vehicle, and then they would break through the obstacles and find trouble with him. And these few days were the last buffer for him. He must find a shortcut during this period. Otherwise, if he was caught by the other party, he would basically die. Although in the Sea of Clouds, for some reason, there was a limit on the strength of the profession, but the upper limit was set at the intermediate high-order profession, similar to the Yuanying stage cultivators in 9 regions. Wang Lu asked himself that with his current strength, he might be able to fight against a Yuanying stage cultivator. But he could only fight for 2 or 3 rounds. Moreover, it couldn't be a peak Yuanying stage or an abnormal Yuanying stage cultivator. At most, it should be similar to Tiger King of the Beast Master School. There must be no additional value on the baseline. If it were those old guys of Heavenly Sword Hall, no matter how confident Wang Lu was, he didn't think that he could keep pace with them after 10 years of cultivation. And this time, the opponent was a Holy One, a legendary level Holy One. The legendary level of the Western continent could barely be equated to the Unity stage cultivators of 9 regions. Of course, this equivalence was very difficult to draw, because the value of the current legendary level of the Western continent was far less than that of the past. Aya, at her peak, had not completely crossed the threshold of the legendary level. However, in her opinion, apart from the Pope, she dared to fight any of the so-called legendary level of the Holy Light religion. If it was the legendary level of the Treasure House manager, she could even fight 5 of them. However, that was only for Aya. For a young cultivator who had only been cultivating for more than 10 years, a legendary level was still a legendary level, an insurmountable mountain. Even if the other side suppressed their strength to the same level as him, they could still crush him by virtue of their experience and skill, not to mention how far away was the intermediate level of high order. In short, this time, he tied the flying pigeon to his back and walked on foot, which had completely deviated from the original intention of this Sea of Clouds war lane. Moreover, he knew that he could not go any deeper into the Sea of Clouds. However, it saved him precious time. During this time, he must find a vehicle that could be recycled as soon as possible. Wang Lu knew that his idea was somewhat whimsical. However, he still remembered that when the Everlasting collapsed and he was forcibly sent back to the starting point, he seemed to have vaguely discovered something. Ha! As he walked on the old road again, Wang Lu soon felt the pressure of the 100-fold gravity again. However, this time, he was carrying the vehicle on his back, so he didn't have to bear the heavy pressure of the unity of man and vehicle. Thus, he was still able to persist. As Wang Lu continued to go deeper into the canyon, the pressure of the gravity became stronger and stronger. Almost every step he took, the pressure doubled. However, as the gravity increased, Wang Lu increasingly felt that the thing he was looking for was getting closer and closer. Finally, he stopped on a barren plain. At this point, the gravity of the Earth has been thousands of times higher than normal. Wang Lu was equivalent to carrying 4 or 5 sets of 5 pairs of load-bearing wheels. Even with his close to Jindan stage physical quality, he began to feel strenuous. Non-phase method was not known for its great power, its pure power was limited. However, it was enough for him to reach this point. The core of gravity was right under his feet. Something was buried here, which formed the strange gravity environment of this valley. The next step was to dig 3 feet into the ground. Needless to say, the ground that could withstand the 1,000-fold gravity was solid. However, Wang Lu used the sword of Mount Kuan as a hoe, digging bit by bit. This upgraded spiritual treasure did not disappoint him. Not only did it have the sharpness to cut iron like mud, but it also had the power to shake the earth. With a swing of the sword, the entire valley would slightly tremble. The only flaw was that the sword spirit Autumn Beam was very dissatisfied with this reckless waste of natural resources. This sword spirit had experienced more than 1,000 years of hardships and had followed more than 10 masters, some strong and some weak, but none of them treated her lightly, treating the dignified sword of Mount Kuan like a Luoyang shovel. Therefore, during the digging process, Autumn Beam did not say a word. She kept a straight face and even refused to show up. Regarding this behavior of disregarding the master's authority, Wang Lu painstakingly dug while earnestly educating her. Little Yang, although you are the sword spirit of this spiritual treasure, moreover, it has been upgraded on your own, your future prospects are boundless, and your value is extraordinary. But you absolutely cannot look down on simple manual labor because of this. You must know that this kind of labor at the bottom contains the real wisdom. Which of our basic necessities do not require labor? Your high and mighty mentality will definitely limit your development in the future. Of course, I do not blame you. Most of the spirits at your level are proud and arrogant. Unfortunately, because of this, there are only a few that can go one step further and approach immortal treasures. In my opinion, it is necessary for the spirits of high-level magical treasures to go down and receive the education of the people at the bottom. Wang Lu's earnest words did not get any response. Wang Lu called out a few times, but there was no response. He thought that this was not the rhythm of being blacklisted, right? Fortunately, when the digging reached the end, Autumn Beam finally could not help but show up. Because not far from Wang Lu's feet, the majestic energy fluctuations could no longer be concealed. The nearly 10,000-fold gravity made it difficult for Wang Lu to even maintain standing. He had already begun to slowly burn his innate vitality. After Autumn Beam sensed this fluctuation, she finally could not help but be curious. What is this? I also find it strange. Wang Lu reluctantly opened his mouth. I really can't think of anything else on the vehicle that could use such a powerful suction force. Is it a toy designed to relieve the driver's fatigue? This is really a heaven-defying toy. Liang Qiu frowned. Do you think I don't understand, that's why you said it? Wang Lu was surprised. You understand? Autumn Beam coldly said. Do you think I'm as simple and easy to fool as Lu Li? Considering Autumn Beam's 1,000 years lifespan, it was unrealistic to expect her to be as pure as a little white flower. Since you are well informed, do you have any opinion on this? Autumn Beam said, I can't say for sure, but this suction force seems to be instinctively calling something. Unfortunately, the thing inside doesn't have the concept of a spirit, otherwise I might be able to communicate with it and explore it. In this treacherous land of the Sea of Clouds, even if there was a spirit, perhaps it would not be able to hold on for so many years. However, as a sword spirit, Autumn Beam's understanding of things was far better than that of ordinary people. Moreover, she had a steady temperament and did not speak lightly. She judged that this suction force was a call, which was most likely not wrong. A call, could it be? While thinking, Wang Lu asked Autumn Beam to work hard with him to dig the last layer of soil. Although the last layer of soil was not thick, it had been compressed by the 10,000-fold gravity for 10,000 years, so it was simply indestructible. Autumn Beam used the source power of the spiritual treasure to directly shake the ground, which caused the soil to crack, revealing the true appearance below. It was a deep and serene darkness, but upon a closer look, it was actually a ball. Chapter 342. What the hell is this? Wang Lu looked at the black ball under his feet in amazement. However, before he could think about it, the black ball flew up with a particularly fierce momentum. Moreover, it triggered a huge change in the gravitational field, which almost sent Wang Lu flying. Wang Lu only saw a blur, and then the black ball was already suspended high in the air. After a pause, it began to violently tremble, as if it had been imprisoned for many years and had finally broken free. Its interior was filled with a passion that urgently needed to be released. However, after a while, the black ball frantically rotated in the air. Sometimes it crazily rushed in a certain direction, and sometimes it turned back at the same speed, like a wandering beast. At the same time, the gravitational force from the black ball became unstable, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. Gradually, Wang Lu found out that the black ball's gravitational force was gradually aimed at a certain direction, as if it wanted to pull something over. However, after tossing around for a long time, in addition to tearing the two sides of the canyon apart and causing landslides, it didn't seem to achieve the desired result. What is this guy doing? Wang Lu asked Autumn Beam. Can you understand it? Autumn Beam has been staring at the black ball with burning eyes, and after a long time, she sighed with emotion. What a powerful spiritual object. Although its spiritual sense has collapsed, the trace of its existence is deeply engraved in its body. The spirit still retains its obsession from when it was alive. Wang Lu tried to understand it. In other words, what we are seeing now is a kind of corpse coming back to life. If you must say so, yes. Autumn Beam tried to further explain to Wang Lu. This black ball should be an astonishing energy core, which can be used in puppets, cloud wave boats, and other things, which can continuously provide energy. Its grade is very high. According to the standard of 9 regions, it should be close to the level of immortal treasure. In addition to providing energy, it can also become the central core of a huge object, responsible for assisting or replacing the user to better play the function of the object. For example, The modified version of the 10,000 Artsex Cloud Wave boat normally needs hundreds of shoot-on-stage cultivators to drive it. However, because there is a spiritual treasure-level central core inside the Cloud Wave boat, it only needs 1 or 2 people to start it. I see. Speaking of this, Wang Lu could understand. It seems that a long time ago, this thing's main body was severely injured and became fragmented. The fragments were scattered in various places, and it was unfortunately buried in a valley. When its spiritual sense was seriously injured and on the verge of collapse, its remaining thought was to use a strong gravitational force to gather its fragmented body together to recover from its injuries. Unfortunately, as the core, the black sphere, was buried underground. The stronger the gravity, the tighter it was trapped by the soil and rocks. It was not until many years later that I was lucky enough to dig it out and see the light of day again. As Wang Lu spoke, he looked at the black ball in the sky that seemed to have gone mad and could not help but smile. Next, let's see if it's worthy of this once-in-a-thousand-years opportunity. While speaking, the black ball finally seemed to have caught something. Its main body shook and then began to violently shake. The black ball stirred up the air, causing a terrible muffled sound in the valley. From an unknown distance away, the sound of mountains collapsing and the earth collapsing could be heard. A moment later, a golden component that looked like a giant bell flew over from afar with dust all over its body. When it got close, it was pulled by the black ball and was directly enveloped by it. Although the black ball was covered with a thick bell-like cover, the gravitational force actually became stronger. From the opening of the bell cover, an incomparably strong gravitational force was released, which caused the entire valley to fall into distortion. Wang Lu's footing was unstable. He hastily operated his non-phase method to isolate the gravitational force outside, and then barely managed to stand up. And this was just the aftermath of the gravitational force. The direction of the gravitational force released by the black ball was obliquely upward, pointing toward the sky. Not long after, an oval-shaped disk flew down from the clouds in the sky and rotated under the bell cover, also hovering in mid-air. After that, one by one, the components were attracted by the gravitational force of the black ball and gathered together. The surface of these components were covered with the traces left behind by the years. Some of them even only had a small part of them left. However, when they gathered together and began to move slowly around the black ball in the bell cover, the scars left by the years faded away and gradually restored their original appearance. This was a self-repairing tank. Although, from the shape alone, it was not the same as a tank. There were neither thick wheels nor sharp horns. At first glance, it looked like a tower. The largest oval chassis, with a slightly convex cushion at the bottom, slowly rotated horizontally. Above the chassis, the black ball hidden in the bell cover was at the core, surrounded by a thick shield, which gradually shrank from the bottom to the top, and finally became a pointed cone. On the surface of this pagoda, there was an opening for people to enter and exit. The internal space, even without considering space expansion spells and other factors, could accommodate 4 or 5 people. At the same time, the smooth lines, the dazzling appearance, and especially the brilliant golden light, were enough for Wang Lu to judge its identity. It must be Golden King. This kind of blinding coloring method, if it's not Golden King, I will eat it whole. Wang Lu looked at the golden tank, which was quietly floating in the air after it was restored, and could not help but laugh. Although it was completely different from the traditional tank shape on the mural, Wang Lu did not intend to pay too much attention to the details. No matter how strange this floating tank looked, it was much better than Flying Pigeon and Everlasting. There was no doubt that this was a high-grade tank. If it was a low-grade tank, perhaps Golden King would disdain to build it. And only Golden King would be so extravagant as to leave such a good thing in the sea of clouds. Other people, such as the ancient almighty who built the transit station, would leave mountains of resources and materials on the periphery of the sea of clouds, but it was impossible for them to abandon the complete cost. This time, when Wang Lu rowed the tank out to scavenge, at first, he did not dare to expect to pick up a complete tank. He hoped to assemble some broken parts and piece together a barely usable guy, which could last for a while. Unexpectedly, his luck was good enough to follow in the footsteps of Golden King. Thinking about it, the pleasure of being friends with a local tyrant was probably similar to this. Whatever the other party casually eliminated was enough to make a new one on his side. Of course, to enjoy the legacy of the predecessors, it was inevitable that he would be suspected of being the successor. But from another point of view, if you were poisoned by the strange aphrodisiac powder and were about to die from the poison,
and at the same time you had to take care of the elderly and children, and there were thousands of brothers behind you who needed to be led by you.
Let alone taking over, even if you wanted to deliver a baby, you might not be able to do it. Next, it depends on whether this new tank is willing to accept a new master.
With that, Wang Lu rode the gust of wind and flew into the air, trying to approach the tank and put his hand on the golden surface of the tank. Many spiritual treasures with a spirit would only follow one master for life, either because of the restriction placed by the master, or because of the loyalty of the spirit itself. However, this chariot of Golden King seemed to have no limit. When Wang Lu pressed his hand on the armor of the chariot and released his primordial spirit into the chariot, the entire chariot trembled. A stream of water-like energy gushed out from the core, flowed around his body, and touched Wang Lu's primordial spirit. Buzz! Wang Lu's primordial spirit felt a strong shock, as if it wanted to bombard him to death. He immediately operated his non-phase method to protect his primordial spirit. However, under the impact, his defensive circle was somewhat shaky. Previously, in order to dig this black ball, he had to endure the 10,000 times heavy pressure, and his non-phase method had already been overloaded. At this time, the primordial spirit's impact happened in a hurry, and the flow of his magical power was not smooth. Thus, his defensive circle was actually not able to hold up. However, primordial spirit was a cultivator's most vital thing. In order to ensure that the defensive strength was not reduced, he could only increase the output, and even if he had to use twice the effort for half the result, he had to resist it. Wang Lu suddenly felt a burst of emptiness in his jade mansion, as if he had been squeezed dozens of times in one night, which made him feel unspeakably uncomfortable. However, under this emptiness contraction, a flash of inspiration came to him. Why was there a need to repel all the impacts? Primordial spirit was indeed a vital thing. Moreover, because his cultivation level was not high enough, his primordial spirit was fragile and could not withstand the devastation. However, his body and jade mansion were like a wilderness. If he could guide the impact to his jade mansion and his body to bear the impact and evenly distribute it, even if he had to suffer some injuries, he could still keep his defense from being broken, and his vital points would not be lost. And as a cultivator with void spirit root, the path inside his body was quite smooth. Thus, it did not take him much effort to guide the impact on his primordial spirit to his body. This method, in simple terms, was selling his blood. Relying on his youthful vigor, his abundant innate vitality, and his non-phase method, which was the best method to heal injuries, he could safely bear the injury. It was just right for the critical moment when his magical power was running out. With that thought in mind, Wang Lu immediately changed his strategy. He changed his defensive method from firm isolation to channeling, guiding the impact of the chariot to his body and jade mansion. Suddenly, the 206 non-phase sword bones groaned in unison, and numerous cracks appeared in his jade mansion. However, no matter how fierce the impact of the chariot was, it could not shake his primordial spirit. Of course, selling his blood was not a long-term solution, but it was enough for him to persist through the current difficulty. This was not a life-and-death struggle, but a slightly harsh test. After the impact of the chariot continued for a period of time, it began to gradually ease. After a while, the force that gushed out from the black ball suddenly became gentle and soft, without any hostility.
Is this subdued? The turbulence just now was a necessary test for the new owner of the chariot. If the owner could not withstand it, then naturally, he would not have the qualification to be the owner. The grade of this chariot was quite high. Generally, even high-order professions would find it difficult to withstand it. Moreover, the sea of clouds restricted the power level, which was enough to shield most of the participants from the trial. Unfortunately, this chariot encountered Wang Lu, who had yet to condense the king pill.
In the Western continent, he was not even a high-order professions, but his endurance was far above that of a common high-order cultivator of 9 regions.
The chariot slightly trembled, as if in response to Wang Lu's question. The tool spirit of this chariot had disappeared, so it did not have any spiritual sense or command. Moreover, it was separated and disintegrated, buried in the soil for more than 10,000 years. However, at this time, it still appeared to be full of spiritual energy. It was indeed a rare good chariot. Considering that you have a master, and I'm just a successor, why don't I call you Pan? The chariot slightly trembled, obviously dissatisfied. Or Golden Wood Ear. The chariot violently trembled. TSK, Seeing that you look like a lightning tower, I might as well call you Tata. This time, the chariot did not object. Obviously, it had a special liking for repetitive words. Chapter 343. When Wang Lu drove the Tata chariot back to the castle in a flying saucer-like manner, the amazement of Aya and the others was self-evident. From the time when Wang Lu set off with the chariot to the time when he drove the flying saucer back, half a day had passed. Although it was not a long time, it made people uneasy. Aya silently waited at the castle gate for Wang Lu's return, but she didn't expect him to come back with a big guy. Where did this come from? Aya's eyes were full of amazement. Her clear eyes were firmly fixed on the flying saucer-like chariot, unable to leave no matter what. A strand of hair that suddenly stood up on top of her head fully showed the excitement in her heart, as well as her love for this chariot. Although the shape was unique, Tata was undoubtedly a very good chariot, and obviously, Aya had no resistance to a good chariot. Wang Lu jumped down from the Tata chariot, still carrying the flying pigeon chariot that he personally built. Seeing Aya's almost shining eyes, he recalled her previous dislike of the flying pigeon and could not help but helplessly smile. You're the type who would rather cry in the chariot than laugh on the flying pigeon. In addition to Aya, Luli was also very fond of Tata. She flew around the steeple-like chariot, and from time to time, she cautiously tapped the body of the chariot with her fingertips, and from time to time, she smiled foolishly at the smooth mirror-like outer wall of the chariot. As for Bai Shixian and Quan Zhouhua, they were also surprised by the uniqueness of this chariot, and their attention was drawn to it. After a while, when everyone had seen enough, Wang Lu clapped his hands. Okay, the problem of the chariot has been solved. Let's get on the chariot and set off. Don't waste the time that I've gained by sacrificing the everlasting. Upon hearing this, Aya's expression turned solemn. She remembered that their situation was not good, far from being able to enjoy the chariot with peace of mind. The threat of holy light religion could come at any time, and at that time, she was far from having the capital to contend against them. This unique chariot was the key to the victory of the weak against the strong. And to be able to obtain this war chariot, Wang Lu undoubtedly contributed a lot. Thinking of this, Aya's heart was slightly moved. She suddenly had an absurd thought. Perhaps for Wang Lu, there was nothing in this world that he couldn't do. Perhaps, he really was invincible? However, before Aya could carefully experience the changes in her heart, Wang Lu had already called for everyone to board the war chariot and fly towards the boundless sea of clouds outside the castle. The gate of the castle slowly opened and closed. Before going out, Aya felt something and looked up. At the top of the two gates, the murals left by Golden King were shining, as if laughing at the insignificance of the people below. At the same time, in another place on the periphery of the Sea of Clouds, in the Blood Demon tent, the preparation of Holy Light Religion had also reached the final stage. Very good, very good. In less than a day, the war chariot is almost complete, and its grade is still within the initial expectations. You guys, when we get back, I'll give you a great merit. Paul paced back and forth in the big tent, overflowing with excitement. The progress of building the war chariot was faster than expected, because one of the 5 archbishops sent by the Pope happened to be good at building war chariot. With the materials in the big tent, he and the others worked together to build a level 3 or 4 war chariot in just half a day. Holy Pure war chariot was not a powerful war chariot. In a large-scale battlefield, its auxiliary role was limited. However, its advantage was that it was fast and stealthy enough, which was suitable for the current task. The purpose of Holy Light Religion was very clear. Instead of honestly competing according to the rules, hoping to arrive at beautiful unique pool peak faster than Wang Lu, it was better to simply cut the weeds and eliminate the roots of the opponent. This was the solution to the root of the problem. Although this method was not his own idea, Paul deeply agreed with it. Especially when the progress of the war chariot was faster than expected. He was filled with joy. At this time, those heretics probably haven't even solved the riddle of entering the Sea of Clouds, right? When we get there in time to block them, I really look forward to their desperate eyes. Paul fiercely said, as if he had already seen the heretics being torn to pieces in front of him, and the sea of holy light giving him a greater gift because he had purified the heretics. Before long, the finishing work of the Holy Pure War Chariot was declared to be completed. Paul waved his hand. Everyone, get on the chariot and get ready to go. Unfortunately, no one paid attention to him. Everyone looked at Faceless One. Even Ferdinand was silently waiting for Faceless One's instruction.
Paul gawked, and then his face turned red, feeling that he had suffered a great humiliation.
Yes, in terms of strength and talent, I'm not that good, but don't forget, I'm the administrator of the king's treasure house. Without me, what can you do even if you have the ability? Let alone if you really have that great ability, why would you let me be the administrator? You can do it yourself. Faceless One didn't even look at the gloomy Paul. He went straight to the holy pure war chariot, sat on the main seat, and then coldly snorted. Do you want me to invite you? Quickly get on the chariot. Before long, the fully covered holy pure war chariot has been completely submerged in the sea of clouds. The holy light religion people were all crowded in the not spacious chariot, each taking their place. Some were responsible for concealing the chariot's track, some were responsible for providing power, and some were responsible for driving the direction. The division of labor was very clear. The grade of the holy pure war chariot was not high, so if they wanted to travel freely in the sea of clouds, they had to rely on human assistance. On the chariot, there were 2 holy ones and 5 archbishops, a luxurious lineup that was jaw-dropping. Because of this, the performance of the holy pure war chariot was far above the normal level. However, after all, its natural level was not high enough, so the performance of the holy pure war chariot was still not satisfactory. Is there no way to go faster? Ferdinand asked in a sinking voice. It's not even as fast as us flying alone. I think it's better to let me. Faceless One turned his head, looked at him with his pale face, and then coldly interrupted. Idiot, do you want to get off the chariot? Think about it with your poor brain. If we can freely walk in this sea of clouds, why would we need to have a chariot to enter? Do you think this is a rule that someone has nothing better to do and randomly designed? Ferdinand was silent. Before this, he had never even heard of the Sea of Clouds, so naturally, he couldn't say anything about the rules of the Sea of Clouds. Since Faceless One opposed it, he no longer insisted. Although Faceless One's arrogant and rude face was unbearable, Ferdinand at least understood the priorities. Right now, the most important thing was to work together to eliminate the hidden danger of the church, rather than personal grudges. Of course, when this matter was over, he and Faceless One would carefully calculate every account. However, just as Ferdinand secretly made up his mind, Faceless One suddenly laughed wildly. That voice seemed to be muffled in a cloth, making people's hair stand on end. Ha 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 ha, well done, heretic. I'm really looking forward to your purification ceremony. The Chief Inquisitor's heart was slightly uneasy. What's wrong? Faceless One didn't hide it and bluntly said, that group of heretics has left the transit station and is moving fast toward the Sea of Clouds. What? The people on the holy pure war chariot were all stunned. They have left the transit station? Are you sure? Ferdinand sternly asked. You're the one who said that it would take them a long time to solve the puzzle, and it would take them several days to build the chariot. We can definitely make it in time, right? What's going on now? Yes, if it's them, it would take them more than a day to solve the puzzle, and building the chariot would take a long time. Even if some of them are good at chariot building, it's impossible for them to do it better than us. But what if it's not just them? Faceless One lightly said, as if he was not explaining for anyone, but rather talking to himself, a certain haunting lunatic is actually willing to put down his status. Hearing the words haunting him, Paul's whole body quivered. Who are you talking about? Ferdinand asked, since you can sense their location, then do you know what grade the chariot they are riding on is? Level 8 or above. Level 8? Isn't that the same level as brilliant extreme speed? The Chief Inquisitor was extremely shocked. How did they do it? In less than a day, they built a level 8 chariot? Is this something that can be achieved by human beings? Of course not. Starting from scratch, even a holy one can't build a level 8 chariot in a day. Faceless One somewhat absent-mindedly said, but they didn't start from scratch, they inherited someone's legacy. Humph, what's the point of you idiots trying to get to the bottom of it? If it's a level 8 chariot, relying on our holy pure war chariot, how could we possibly catch up? We can't catch up with the chariot, but can't we catch up with them? Faceless One said, slightly tilted his head to another direction, and then sneered. It's almost time to stop. Very good. Keep this momentum and reach beautiful unique Pool Peak as fast as possible. As long as we get to the mountain, the other party's means will be useless.
After setting off from the castle, Wang Lu immediately drove the chariot into the sea of clouds at the fastest speed. And this tower-shaped chariot also lived up to his expectations. After a period of acceleration, it resolutely changed its shape. The sharp top of the tower was suddenly flattened, and like a sharp lance, it broke through the air.
Speed, as fast as lightning, jaw-dropping speed.
Once the tower-shaped chariot flattened its body, it became like a lance, and its speed was no less than a swift and fierce flying sword. Wang Lu only saw the sea of clouds on both sides crazily retreating as if they were torn apart by a huge force. One scene after another changed around him. Sometimes it was a raging flame, sometimes it was a towering mountain, but all of them were just a flash. Before he could take a second look, they were already left behind by the chariot. The chariot was not only fast, but also very strong. Those flashing scenes were actually tests in the sea of clouds. According to the normal procedure, it would take a great deal of effort to pass. However, in front of the Golden King's chariot, the surrounding troubles were not worth mentioning.
Very good. Things are developing very smoothly. If we continue, it shouldn't be long before we arrive at beautiful unique Pool Peak. Standing in the control position inside the chariot, Wang Lu calmly observed the changes around him.
Although the sea of clouds was still a blur, there were many signs that they were quickly approaching the core.
But the question is, how long can this go on smoothly? If the people of Holy Light Religion want to make their move, now is the time.
Wang Lu muttered to himself, and soon, there were many speculations in his mind.
However, in front of the Golden King's chariot, he didn't think the other party could make any effective resistance. Although winning in this way was somewhat unfair, the people of Holy Light Religion were obviously working for Golden King, but they had offended Golden King himself. Therefore, even if they lost, it was not an injustice at all. Everyone, have a good rest. Soon, we can celebrate the victory on beautiful unique Pool Peak. Good. I like celebration banquets the most, Lu Li happily said. Her smile lit up the narrow space inside the chariot. However, at this time, the bright smile on the girl's face suddenly froze. The next moment, a fountain of blood gushed out from her mouth and nose, and the girl's light body slowly fell down like a feather. Chapter 344. Lu Li. Sister Xian. Woof.
Lu Li suddenly spurted out a mouthful of blood and fainted.
In an instant, the car turned into a mess. Bai Shixian picked up Lu Li and, while checking her pulse, tried to summon her magical power, turning it into healing power. However, the magical power of the living dead was like a stone sinking into the sea. Aya took out all of the pills that she obtained from her 100 years of experiential learning across the 2 continents, but she didn't know which one would be effective. Quan Zhouhua anxiously scurried around Lu Li. Although its power was formidable, it couldn't be used to save people. In a panic, Wang Lu stared at Lu Li. His fists were clenched, and blood flowed out from his palms. However, he still made a calm judgment. Stop. Stop. Aya was surprised, but then she thought of the problem.
Her complexion became incomparably gloomy.
Despicable villain. Get out here. With that, the caliban was unsheathed.
The golden light was incomparably sharp, as if it was substantial.
After being reminded by Wang Lu, Aya also thought that Lu Li was seriously injured at this time, which was undoubtedly the work of Holy Light Religion. Although they didn't care about the specific method, their purpose was obviously not to kill, but to delay their footsteps. Otherwise, since they could inexplicably make Lu Li vomit blood, why couldn't they just let her die? Perhaps, the reason why they didn't directly kill her was because, you're very tactful.
Under the alarmed and angry eyes of the crowd, that gentle and indifferent voice came out from Lu Li's mouth.
Then with a strange posture, Lu Li left the embrace of Bai Shixian and quietly stood in front of everyone.
It was still the same body, that pure and flawless face, but her expression was stiff like a dead person, as if she was not used to her own face.
Faceless. I like to deal with smart people the most. They don't talk much.
Faceless One's words were full of sarcasm, but his voice was calm.
Unfortunately, you're not the people of my Holy Light Religion. Therefore, even if you're smart, you can only die.
Aya tightly gripped the stone sword in her hand as her anger overflowed.
Stabbing people in the back, so despicable and shameless,
This is indeed the style of holy light religion. Ridiculous. A dignified Night King actually dares to say such ridiculous words. No wonder you're the ruler of a destroyed country. Faceless mocked without any trace of politeness. Sneak attack? Do you have the right to criticize others on this point? The king's treasure house is the territory of holy light religion. Have you obtained anyone's approval to enter the treasure house? You sneaked into someone else's territory, so it's only natural for you to be punished. Aya was startled when she heard this, and then her face sank. Sophistry. Wang Lu reached out his hand to stop Aya, indicating that he would speak. Did they do it on Dragon City's celebration night? Wang Lu asked softly. Was it that drink? Faceless One's stiff face twisted into a smile. How is that possible? Although at that time we were hostile to each other, Dragon City is, after all, your territory. If I poisoned the drink, it's not a justifiable defense, nor is it a punishment for the traitor. It's purely a sneak attack. I believe in holy light. How could I do such a despicable and shameless thing? Aya angrily said. You dare to say that you didn't do it? Of course I did it, but I didn't poison it. I just chatted with her so that she could face her heart more clearly, that's all. For you heathens, this is simply too gentle and considerate. Face her heart more clearly. Wang Lu sneered. That's all? Faceless One said, of course, the two sides are hostile to each other. As a believer of holy light, how could I take care of the enemy? Therefore, while taking care of her, I also induced the entanglement in the depths of her heart. That's fair. Induced? Entanglement? Wang Lu sneered. Fool a fool. How could Lu Li have such a high IQ to cause her entanglement? Oh. Faceless One was slightly surprised. I thought the two of you are from the same sect, martial brother and sister, so you would be as close as one person. Turns out, even you don't know her. No entanglement? In this world, only a stone will not entangle. As long as it's a human, no matter how simple it is, it will entangle. Because this is what a human is, a flawed mortal that needs the guidance of holy light to continue to move forward. However, on the other hand, it's fortunate that human is full of flaws, so I have a place to use my skills. Holy light religion is full of talented people, so it's not easy to make a name for oneself in the church. With that, Faceless One suddenly tilted his head. By the way, if you're trying to delay the time by chatting, that's exactly what we want. According to the current speed, it won't be long before we meet. By the way, if you're trying to use the life-saving magical treasure left by your sect, you'd better give it up as soon as possible. Even if it's a life-saving magical treasure, if you can't get the consent of the person, it won't work. No matter what, it's the same, right? Upon hearing this, Aya was startled. If the person didn't agree, the life-saving magical treasure wouldn't work. She was very clear about this. However, Faceless One said that, could it be? You've occupied Lu Li's spirit? Aya was shocked and angry at the same time. Her hands that held the Caliban sword slightly trembled. As an opponent who has fought against Faceless One, Aya was very clear about his horror. More than 100 years ago, when Faceless One's strength was still very weak, his spirit occupation was a terrifying skill that made people pale in fear. Faceless One was best at playing with people's hearts. He could dig out the softest and darkest part of the human heart, and then use it as nourishment to nourish the darkness. The nourishment process was completely silent, so much so that even the nourishment itself could not detect it. However, once the nourishment was over, a terrible thing would be born. What was born was the Faceless One himself. Once a brave warrior, a strategist, a magician, or a benevolent and virtuous person, once occupied by Faceless One, they would eventually become the new Faceless One. Faceless One didn't have a face because he had seized many people's faces. If he wanted to, he could even change into any face at will. However, once occupied by his spirit, there was no precedent of recovery. Because of this, when Aya learned that Faceless One was still alive, she was always on guard against his spirit occupation. More than 100 years ago, she had a full understanding of spirit occupation. She was also particularly sensitive to the seed he planted in other people's hearts, so it was impossible for her not to discover it. However, more than 100 years later, it seemed like Faceless One's spirit occupation had entered a new realm. Yes, it's spirit occupation. Faceless One casually replied, speaking of which, It's really a very sweet nourishment. Although the realm is not high, the taste is more delicious than that of high-order professions.
You?
Aya felt her vision go black. Wang Lu still maintained his calm.
Spirit occupation? Is it like possession or something like that?
That's really troublesome. It seems like I can only send her back to the mountain to be dealt with by the elders.
Send her back to the mountain?
Faceless One laughed in spite of himself. Hee, in the sea of clouds, even the legendary sages are not free.
Do you think a few dead things given by your master can do it?
Oh, if the quality is not enough, then the quantity will make up for it. Wang Lu lightly said, took out a stack of talismans from his mustard seed bag, and weighed them in his hand.
1 is not enough, but 10 should be enough.
Faceless One's eyes narrowed.
This is heavenly talisman? It's actually heavenly talisman?
There were millions of talismans in 9 regions, but the prestige of heavenly talisman was known even in the Western continent. It could break the dimension and the plane, and forcibly transport people back to the set location. Although, in this sea of clouds, general space props and spells were basically ineffective, but if it was heavenly talisman, moreover, it was activated at the same time. Yes, in terms of power, perhaps it can really break through the blockade of the sea of clouds. However, the premise is that it has to go through Lu Li herself.
She agreed.
Wang Lu said and then spread out the 10 talismans, and on each of them was written the same name. Lu Li obviously, it was already prepared. Moreover, the talismans have been modified by the elders, so whether Lu Li is willing or not, as long as I activate them, she must roll back to the mountain. This is called the authority of the leader. Well then, I'm not going to talk nonsense with you. Let's send Lu Li back. With that, Wang Lu poured his magical power into the heavenly talisman, which triggered a dazzling light.
Oh, it seems like you're serious? Faceless One finally seemed a bit surprised.
But, I have completed the spirit occupation. Using 10 heavenly talismans to send a corpse back, you heathens have committed the felony of extravagance.
Corpse? Not necessarily.
Wang Lu said. Have you really completed the spirit occupation? Although you said it so confidently, I don't believe it. Therefore, I'll just send it back and let the elders help me identify it. If Lu Li is still alive, with the strength of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, how could she be saved? If she's dead, letting the corpse return to its hometown is also humane. The strong confidence in Wang Lu's words also infected Aya. That's right, although there has never been a precedent of surviving the spirit occupation, but if it's Wang Lu, perhaps.
Enough.
Faceless One coldly said, since you doubt whether my spirit occupation is successful or not, I might as well commit suicide, and you can directly bring the corpse back to your hometown. Wang Lu immediately extinguished the light of the talismans in his hand and then burst into a smile.
It seems like it really didn't work. Otherwise, why would you say you want to commit suicide?
In that case, I'll put away these 10 fluorescent talismans.
Fluorescent talismans?
Everyone looked at the talismans in Wang Lu's hand in surprise.
Isn't that Spirit Sword Heavenly Talisman? Am I sick?
Why would I prepare 10 priceless heavenly talismans? However, I have as many fluorescent talismans as I want, so it's more than enough to swindle you. Wang Lu smiled lightly and put the fluorescent talismans back into his mustard seed bag. However, from Aya's point of view, she could see that Wang Lu's hand was actually slightly trembling.
Very well. Lu Li is not dead.
The protective measures that the elders put on her are really effective. And since she's still alive, everything is possible.
Hey, does fraud make you so happy?
Faceless One curiously asked and then stretched out his right hand. Right in front of Wang Lu and the others, Lu Li's 5 slender fingers, which were most suitable for holding a sword, were cut off.
Chapter 345.
Oh, it's quite painful. As the 5 fingers fell to the ground, Faceless One lightly uttered an, "Oh," and then dropped his arm. Blood gushed out like a fountain from the stump of the fingers. With Lu Li's current physical quality, even if her fingers were really cut off by a sharp weapon, the wound would heal in a short time. This was the comprehensive quality of a successor disciple. People often said that her defense and resilience were slightly weak, but that was only relative to her offensive ability. At present, the 5 fingers were cut off, but the blood continued to flow. Obviously, this was the intentional action of Faceless One, who controlled the body. He deliberately squeezed the blood from Lu Li's body to the wound, allowing it to gush out and cause a lot of blood loss. Hey, I didn't expect your psychological quality to be so good. The other people around you are going crazy, but you, who have the best relationship with Lu Li, are still very calm. Faceless One flaunted the bloody stump of the broken fingers in front of everyone, and then observed the seething anger of Aya and the others while expressing his curiosity about Wang Lu's indifference. What's there to care about? Wang Lu said, it's not like a few broken fingers can't be put back. As for pain or not, in any case, the one who's in pain is you. Faceless One laughed. Although his expression was stiff and distorted, it seemed to be joy from the heart. Well said. But, to be able to remain calm when the people close to you are seriously injured, are you really human? Or do you not care about your junior sister as much as you seem? Wang Lu lightly said, whether I am a human or not, whether I have human feelings or not, whether I care about it or not, my junior sister, after I catch you, I will let you seriously experience it. As for now, tell me your conditions. Conditions? Faceless One asked. Do you think I'm here to talk about conditions with you? Wang Lu said, aren't you? Then you're here to chat? Very well, I'll continue to drive. You can accompany me on the road. With that, Wang Lu reached out to the vehicle's control device, ready to start the vehicle to move forward. Faceless One, of course, didn't come to chat. After Wang Lu obtained the inheritance of Golden King and the level 8 vehicle, it was impossible to defeat them in the Sea of Clouds with normal methods. Therefore, he could only resort to extreme measures, and the hostage in his hands was his greatest trump card. However, when facing an opponent like Wang Lu, the use of the hostage card was also very particular. If one did not play it well, even a good card would be played badly, so... Have a slow chat? Sure. Faceless One said, by the way, as you guessed, I did not complete the spiritual occupation of Lu Li. However, it's not that I can't occupy her, but I deliberately left a line. But since you don't care about it, it seems like I don't have to hold back, right? Wang Lu's grip on the control stick tightened. What he feared had come true. This was the worst possible situation. A Lu Li who had no value of rescue and a Lu Li who still had a glimmer of hope were completely different concepts. If Lu Li had died in a sense, it was actually a good thing, because Wang Lu could avenge her at all costs, without any restriction or constraint. But Nauj. I'm not here to talk about conditions with you, because I don't need to talk about my conditions, you already know them. Faceless One lightly said. No need to talk about it, I can't accept it. Wang Lu also coldly responded. Really? Then, let's analyze the situation rationally. Faceless One said. My condition is that you stop here and fight us head-on. Of course, this is a dead end for you. So, I can also put it simply, my condition is to let you die. And then, the bargaining chip in my hand is your most valued junior sister, Lu Li. However, if you die, she will not survive. Moreover, even if I promise to let her live, I'm afraid you won't believe me. Wang Lu sneered. Isn't that clear? Your so-called hostage is meaningless. Faceless One said, it does seem meaningless, but if it's really meaningless, why did you stop the car? Why did you stop until now and not dare to start? Wang Lu's hand that was holding the control stick became even more stiff. Ha ha ha, are you deeply entangled? Faceless One said with a smile. Even if you rationally know that this is a dead end, emotionally, you can't just watch your dear junior sister die. Because no matter how many reasons you have, you can't suppress your sense of responsibility and closeness to your junior sister, right? Therefore, even if you are entangled, you know what to do, but you can't do it. Unfortunately, deep spiritual occupation can only be carried out once in a short period of time. Otherwise, right now, you would be a good occupation target. Wang Lu was silent. His eyes gradually moved away from Lu Li. At this time, he heard Aya's voice in his mind. I'm sorry, Wang Lu. It's all because of me that you and Lu Li are involved in this matter. After all, you're not locals, so Holy Light Religion has no reason to kill you. Therefore, I think it's better for me to. For Aya's request, Wang Lu's response was only one sentence, idiot, get lost. Wang Lu. Shut your mouth and obediently watch from the side. If you say one more word, don't blame me for blacklisting you. Aya was stunned for a long time, and finally, she silently cut off the primordial spirit transmission. Actually, she also knew that even if she was willing to sacrifice herself, it might not make the situation better. Not to mention that Wang Lu would never accept her sacrifice. It was just that. If she didn't do it, what else could she do? After a long silence, time passed by bit by bit. Wang Lu's hand was still on the control stick, but he couldn't push it down. Faceless One was interested in watching Wang Lu's reaction, and from time to time, he also used his cold eyes to warn the eager Quan Zhouhua and Bai Shixian. Of course, the wound on her palm was not treated, and because of excessive blood loss, Lu Li's body has shown an unnatural paleness. If it were an ordinary person, perhaps she would have already passed out or even died. Even though his spirit occupation was still a little short of completion, he still had the ability to seize Lu Li's life and death. If other people dared to act rashly, they would only end up in a life-and-death situation. Of course, if they really made their move, it would not be difficult for them to kill Faceless One's avatar. Moreover, after killing it, they could get rid of the burden and go into battle lightly. However, would Wang Lu allow them to make their move? If he wanted to make his move, he would have done it himself. Why drag it on? After an unknown amount of time, Aya's battlefield intuition became increasingly aware of the approaching danger. The Holy Light Religion's vehicle was approaching at an alarming speed, and her palms were sweating. Wang Lu finally opened his mouth to break the silence. Just now you asked me, why did we stop here? Faceless One said, by the way, I also want to ask, you've put your hand on the control stick for so long, but since you don't dare to push it down, why don't you let go? Wang Lu said, because if I let go, I can't see the situation outside. Faceless One suddenly froze, as if he thought of something. What? Bit by bit, Wang Lu's smile returned to his face. The inside of this vehicle is completely enclosed, and the armor is not transparent. Therefore, the reflection of the outside scene from the cabin is actually a transit point. And this transit point is in my hands. Whatever you want to see, you have to get my consent. And from the time I touched the control stick until now, what I showed you is the same scene. Don't you think the clouds outside the vehicle are too monotonous? Faceless One thought for a moment. But the vehicle hasn't started, at least you can't fake this. Yes, you're inside the vehicle, so the internal energy change can't be hidden from you. But why would I need to start the vehicle? The so-called movement is relative. Even if the vehicle doesn't move, if the surrounding scenery is moving, it's the same. The interior of the Sea of Clouds is unpredictable, so it's not surprising that there are several areas that can move, right? Faceless One was silent. As a veteran of the Sea of Clouds trial, he, of course, knew that it was not surprising. I've been waiting here for so long, and I thought I couldn't wait anymore. But the final result is just passable. Wang Lu said with a smile, finally, I've been waiting for this opportunity. Opportunity. Faceless One softly repeated. At the same time, he was ready to completely annihilate Lu Li's life force at the fastest speed. If Wang Lu wanted to perish indiscriminately, that would indeed be the worst result. However, if he let Lu Li fall, it would cause a serious psychological blow to Wang Lu, which was also a good thing. Spirit occupation could also be used on him. However, the next moment, an unexpected change made Faceless One's reaction slightly slower. Wang Lu pulled the control stick to the side, and the entire chassis of the vehicle and the floor of the cockpit opened up. A strong suction came from below, pulling Wang Lu and Faceless One down at the same time. Aya, the rest is up to you. Before disappearing, Wang Lu left a final sentence. Falling endlessly. After falling out of the chariot, Wang Lu and Faceless One fell into an endless fall in the vast sea of clouds. All around them were vast clouds, and only the strong sense of weightlessness reminded the two that they were falling. Moreover, the speed was getting faster and faster, completely without any wind resistance. What an interesting move. It's beyond my expectations. While falling, Faceless One earnestly nodded and said, Are you really not worried that I'll erase Lu Li, and then both of us will suffer? Beside Faceless One, Wang Lu had a serious look on his face. His attention was firmly locked on Faceless One's body, paying attention to any subtle movement. Upon hearing Faceless One's question, Wang Lu was surprised. Why should I worry? Isn't your goal from the beginning? Right now, there's no interference from other people, which should be what you want.
Faceless One was slightly surprised.
I didn't expect you to be so self-aware. If it were other people, perhaps they would think that Faceless One's goal was to intercept Wang Lu and his team, so that they couldn't get close to beautiful unique Pool Peak and win this trial. However, Wang Lu himself was very clear that Faceless One's real goal was him, only him. He didn't care whether the administrator of the king's treasure house would be replaced or not. As the church's executioner, his task was to purify the enemies of the church. Other things were not within the scope of his consideration.
As for Aya?
If it was the Night King Aya, perhaps he could use all kinds of means to purify her. However, now that she was in the state of the brave departed, it was not worth it to make a special trip. Therefore, when the time was ripe, Wang Lu immediately pulled him to jump out of the vehicle, so that Aya, Xiao Bai, and the others could get rid of the burden and rush forward. Then, the game really began. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.